So what is actually on the line? If you're a Clemson fan or a South Carolina Gamecock fan, what have you got to win? What have you got to lose in probably the biggest Palmetto Bowl matchup in history? I mean, there's some big ones, and you can look back and say, oh, I was there in 1981, and that was a big matchup. And maybe it's a little hyperbolic to say that. Maybe it's a little over the top, a little heavy-handed to say that this is the biggest Clemson and South Carolina matchup in the history of this rivalry. But there is an awful lot on the line this week. An awful lot on the line this week. And, you know, look, there's bragging rights on the line. There's hatred on the line. There's trash talk in just a couple of days on Thanksgiving on the line. And Ben, if you would put computer channel on for me so that I could play this piece of audio over the air. This is what this rivalry means to a lot of people. A lot of you treat it just like the teams did on November 20th, 2004.
Savell Newton, big strike, incomplete. Good idea. Yep. And now we got some extracurricular activity out there.
Well, this was bound to happen.
And now Lou Holtz scrambles out on the field, and now both benches start to empty.
Right now, you got to get police patrolling.
Who doesn't love watching vintage sports footage? That happened 20 years and 1 week ago today, November 20th, 2004. But you go back and you watch that Jefferson Pilot broadcast, I swear it looks like it was shot in the 1950s. It's crazy how far technology has come since 2004. I remember watching TV, watching games back then and thought, wow, this looks absolutely incredible. This footage looks amazing. And you look back on it 20 years and a week later, and it looks like straight up garbage. Welcome into Wire to Wire with Diesel and Cole. Bryson Cole is, I don't know, probably in a bush somewhere right now, out in a field, going deer hunting today. And it's me and producer Ben hanging out with us, man. Ben, you deserve a lot of credit because you have been an absolute Iron Man this week for the Fan Upstate, and you deserve to be recognized for that.
Oh, don't
because
even.
You've been running the Rob Brown Show all week.
Pleasure.
You also were here last night running Furman basketball, which tipped off at 11:30.
Our boys did good, yeah.
And they won the game, so you were here until 2 o'clock last night.
The guys
running
were out in
Furman
Vegas.
Basketball.
Yeah, and then back to Rob Brown.
Back in this morning.
But, you know, it's a privilege. It takes a village to keep this train going.
And you're back here running Wire to Wire with Diesel and Cole Bryson. So a tremendous amount of credit is due for you.
Thanks,
Look,
Deez.
I was reading a great article from a friend of the show, somebody that we've had on several times over the past couple of weeks and months, Grayson Mann of TigerNet. Whenever our normal guest, David Hood from TigerNet, can't join us, Grayson Mann jumps right in. He does an absolutely phenomenal job. I was reading his article from yesterday where he said, started with the line, a home game against the Gamecocks stands in Clemson's path of a potential playoff berth. As of right now, Clemson sitting number 12 in the college football playoff rankings. That is not going to be good enough to get them into the playoff, and it's by virtue of the teams behind them that very well could go on to win their conference championships. 12 is not good enough to get you in. They are currently the first team on the outside looking in, and this week, the South Carolina Gamecocks stand to either ruin Clemson's chances of getting in the playoff, or they could springboard Clemson into the playoff. I think a win over South Carolina, which I believe would be Clemson's first ranked win of the season, that would be a big deal and probably enough to move Clemson up to that 10 spot. If you want to get safe, if you want to be safe, you got to be in that 10 spot because at least as of right now, Arizona State is going to jump you by virtue of being a conference champion. The South Carolina Gamecocks could be doing the Clemson Tigers a favor, springboarding them into the playoff, or you have the chance to absolutely rip the Clemson Tigers' hearts out on Saturday. So the question is, what's on the line? What's on the line for both of these teams? 71307, start your text with keyword fan. You can also call in to the Renewal by Anderson of the Carolinas fan phone, 844-FAN phone. That's phone with an F, 844-326-3663. So we'll start with the team who won the last matchup. And as I always believe, that you win the most recent matchup, you get talked about first. That's how it goes on this show. That is and will always be a rule on this show. You win, you get talked about first. For Clemson, what's on the line if Clemson wins on Saturday? Well, easy. You silence the critics. Dabo Swinney gets to silence the critics by beating his biggest rival, by beating an SEC team, by getting a ranked win, and, of course, making it into the college football playoff. It's also a stay of execution on the narrative that, yes, people like me, people like Cole Bryson, et cetera, are guilty of bringing up the narrative that this program is washed, that its best days are behind it, that they're never going to make the college football playoff. Look, they needed help to get here, but that doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter that they needed help to get into the college football playoff. It just matters that that they're there, right? All that matters is that you're there. And then obviously, of course, this helps with recruiting. It helps with recruiting. So you get into the college football playoff. Number one, there's going to be a couple of guys who are there who may be making that final decision on what school they're going to go to. Maybe they choose Clemson or South Carolina over this. Maybe they don't. I mean, if a win or a loss in a rivalry game decides where you're going to go to school, that's your prerogative, I guess. But at least the recruits are going to be there to see probably the best atmosphere in Death Valley this season. So that's the opportunity that Clemson has in front of them. Silence the critics, silence the narrative that this program is washed up, get help in recruiting. And it also sets the precedent that even in a down year, Clemson is a playoff contender. Now they were riding high after that Georgia loss, that bludgeoning. They went on a run of 5 or 6 straight games where things were looking really good for the Clemson Tigers. It's like, oh, okay. They just ran into a buzzsaw in week number 1, and they're going to get this figured out down the stretch. Clearly something just wasn't working, or Georgia was just that good that they were able to completely shut the Clemson Tigers offense down. Also, first year of a new season, maybe playing a little tight offensively, but they got on a run after that and started feeling really good about themselves. And then they played Louisville and looked awful. It's been a bad season for the Clemson Tigers any way you shake it, sitting most of the time at the tail end of the top 25. They didn't fall out of it this year like they did last year, but sitting down at the bottom of that. This sets the precedent at Clemson that even in a down year, you are a playoff contender. And of course, that is huge for recruiting as well. So if you're Clemson, you really cannot lose this football game. You cannot lose this football game if you're a Clemson Tiger. It brings all of those things back up. It amplifies the critics. It amplifies the narrative that the program is washed. It looks bad for recruits who maybe in the state of South Carolina are trying to decide where it is they want to go. And they say, you know what? Everybody's right. Clemson is washed. I'd rather go to South Carolina. That's where they've got a head coach that dances in the locker room. That's where they got all the good momentum, right? They're going to want to go down there to the state capital and play down there. So if you're Clemson, you cannot lose this game. It only makes the boo birds get louder, the detractors get more ammo. And here's the thing. On the flip side of that coin, if you're South Carolina, you can't lose. Like, it's weird to say, right? If you're Clemson, you can't lose. But if you're South Carolina, you can't lose. It's the same words, but 2 completely different meanings. Do you feel me on that? 71307. Text in. Start your text with keyword fan. Got a lot of Tolos already sending in their upset picks. Percy, I got you. Going to be copying and pasting these throughout the show and getting them onto our Google Doc. Dan B does a fantastic job of keeping track of all these things. Madcraft wants Georgia Tech plus 19.5 against Georgia. But are you guys agreeing with me on this? This concept that if you're Clemson, you cannot lose. But if you're South Carolina, you can't lose. Because if they lose the game, if South Carolina loses this game on the scoreboard, what changes? Nothing. You're still going to a bowl game. You still have positive momentum in your program. You still have your quarterback coming back. You still have a lot of really key pieces, especially in the wide receiver room, coming back. You still have one of the most energetic young coaches in the game, and you still have a bowl game in front of you. Did I say that twice? Either way, nothing really changes. And South Carolina being where they are at number 15 is very unlikely to make a college football playoff or make a run for it this year by beating Clemson. So South Carolina really can't, unless just tremendous amount of chaos ensues. And I'm talking like Mississippi State just blows the doors off of Ole Miss in the Egg Bowl. If Alabama gets embarrassed by Auburn in the Iron Bowl, then maybe by virtue of just moving up, right? But the problem is South Carolina doesn't have the head-to-head in either one of those matchups. So it's still a bugaboo, still a difficult situation. And in all likelihood, you're not going to make it. And that's okay. That's okay, because this is part of the journey. Really, next year is the year South Carolina should be able to ride all this positive momentum into the 2025 season. Again, you got your quarterback back. You got a lot of pieces on defense back. You're gonna have to make some strides in the transfer portal. Probably go get you another Rocket Sanders type of running back. Now you've got the precedent of being a place where SEC running backs want to go and flourish in this Dowell Loggins offense. Now it feels like you almost can't get rid of Dowell Loggins. Not that you would necessarily want to, considering the strides that this offense has made in the past 5 or 6 weeks. But you can't lose if you're South Carolina. So go out there and play loose. Go out there and play free. You have everything to gain. You're not going to jump into the playoff. You get to play spoiler. You get to prove that Dabo is old hat and that you run this state. All rivalry games have high stakes, but this one might be the highest stakes in this rivalry's history. And I absolutely love it. The worst part about this is that building up to this game, we're not going to be on the air tomorrow or Friday. And that stinks. I like being here with you guys, chopping it up, talking football. 71307, start your text with keyword fan if you want to jump in and be a part of the conversation. Do you agree with my assessment that if you're Clemson, you cannot lose? And if you're South Carolina, you can't lose? Do you agree with that? 71307, start your text with keyword fan, or jump into the stream on Facebook, on Twitter, or on YouTube. Just search for the Fan Upstate. Your upset picks are coming in fast and furious. We've added today Josh Pate, who's taking USC plus 7.5 against Notre Dame. Tigerville Bo wants Georgia Tech over Georgia plus 19.5. Lyman Robb is taking Syracuse plus 11 over Miami. Percy wants Memphis over Tulane. That's the game that I took. 2 9-2 teams. Memphis lost a couple of AAC games. Tulane has lost to 2 Power 5 teams this year. That's the difference. Tulane playing absolutely excellent defense right now. Madcraft taking Georgia Tech plus 19.5 against Georgia, and Philip Rollins also rolling with Memphis plus 13.5. That makes 60 upset picks as of right now. Normally, when we pick on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we end up around 115, 120 or so. It's okay if we don't necessarily reach that number, but I would love to reach 100 entries today. I would love to reach 100 entries today. And if we don't, that's a lot of Tolos who are not going to get their upset picks in. And there's going to be a lot of Tolos losing 2 points. Ben, who do we have on the phone?
Oh, we got Dewey.
Our daily Dewey. Dewey, what's on your mind?
I got a couple of things.
Okay.
First, I want to do my upset picks in case I forget.
Okay.
I want to do Auburn over Alabama.
What's the spread on that game, Dewey?
I don't know, but I think 14. But Auburn needs to win because I hate Alabama.
Why? What did Alabama ever do to you except for win a lot of games?
They cheat.
Is that your opinion, or do you have fact?
Oh, that's my opinion, but I think they're on steroids.
Oh, okay.
And I got one more thing.
Yeah.
I need to call out Rick for messing with my friend Tom yesterday. Rick,
Hey.
I got a message for you. Carolina's going to win, and then Tom's going to lick the plate off of you.
Dewey, if you and Tom were in a gang, what would your gang name be?
the Tom gang.
Tom. Thanks, Dewey. That is your daily Dewey. Look, I'm glad that Dewey called in and called out Rick, because Rick called out Tom yesterday, and Dewey and Tom made friends last week on the air. And so, you know, friends support friends. And that's what we're all about here on the Fan Upstate, wire to wire with Diesel and Cole Bryson, with special guest Ben running the ones and twos today. When we come back, we had a fantastic conversation earlier today due to travel. I understand that it's a little weird to replay an interview this early in the show, but our good friend of the show, Jake Crain, was traveling, and he was gracious enough to join me to step away from his family in Tupelo, Mississippi, to come and chop it up with me for about 20 minutes earlier today. So I'm going to play that for you next. You're going to hear it. We'll talk Clemson. We'll talk South Carolina. We'll talk the Iron Bowl and everything in between. That's next right here on the Fan Upstate.
Until Text us at 71307. Keyword fan. This is Wire to Wire with Cole, Bryson, and Diesel on The Fan.
Upstate.
It's Wire to Wire with Diesel and Cole Bryson, joined right now on the phone by Jake Crain, host of Crain and Company. Find him on Twitter at @JakeCrain_ and at Crain Company on Twitter. Jake, I know you expect me to go all college football here, but I'm going to throw you a curveball to start things here. The rich getting richer.
My hands back and go the other way with it.
The rich getting richer. The Dodgers just signed Blake Snell to a 5-year deal worth $185 million that includes no opt-outs and some deferred money. Now, here's where we bring it back to college football. How long until we start seeing contracts like that with college players? You know, I'm thinking of the Bryce Underwood deal, who just flipped to Michigan for $13 million. How long until we start seeing actual language in these college players' contracts that will keep them from potentially transferring away a year, 2 years down the road?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the biggest qualms that I have with it. I'm not going to sit here and be a hypocrite and say I can get paid for my name, image, and likeness on Crain and Company, but yet somebody that can run a 4.4 and jump 44 inches and, you know, fit a ball between the donut hole from 45 yards away shouldn't. My biggest thing is, you know, just like the contract I have, there's structure to it. It's a two-sided thing. There's expectations from me as far as, you know, my commitment to staying where I'm at for a certain length of time. And we need that. This is why when they let NIL out with really no guidelines, when they let the transfer portal out with no guidelines, when you can play 35 years in college now with no end in sight, it's such an amazing product on the field, though. People are still going to watch, and they're watching more than they ever have before. So there's not a ton of incentive to change it. But one thing I'm interested in is as we get into this Super League that we're going to eventually get when it's the Big Ten and the SEC, really, and you know, we got 50 so odd teams in there. What I'm hoping is that in order to play at one of the schools that are in that Super League that is broken away from the NCAA, you have to sign an agreement to get in there. And then once you get there, structurally, whatever the NIL deal is, if you're at Auburn or you're at Texas or you're at TCU or whatever, you have to stay a certain amount of time. I'm sure there's going to be some behavioral clause in there. And if you decide to leave before that time, just like in my contract and your contract, you know, there's consequences for that, whether that's paying money back or whatever. So I think eventually we're going to get to a structure. Now, as far as the amount, I don't know if we're ever going to see a recruit get $182 million over a 5-year period like Blake Snell. That's a little bit of a different ballpark, pun intended. But I'm never shocked to see the Dodgers be able to spend inordinate amounts of money. They basically gave, you know, Shohei Ohtani half the gold in L.A. That they're going to give to him in about 8 years or whatever it is, or when he decides to go finish out in Japan. So I hope we get some structure soon.
Jake, I want to stay right there for just 1 second on the Super League concept, because the SEC is like basically already there. And one thing that I know I've talked about on my show, and I'm sure you have as well, is that SEC fans were going to have to adjust to 2 and 3 losses in a season and still being in the hunt, right? I mean, a lot of fan bases are used to losing no games or just 1 game in a season. Well, now they're getting used to losing 2 and 3. How are fans of schools adjusting to that 3-loss feel? Like, it just feels icky, right? When you're expected to go out there and have a 0 on the second number on the score sheet.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a lot harder to monopolize the sport the way that Nick Saban was able to. I don't think you're going to have Trent Richardson as your third-string running back anymore. Not only with you know, NIL now, but the transfer portal and kind of the way this is working out. And listen, I love parity. I think this is fantastic. I can't wait for the playoff. It's almost impossible for them to screw it up, talking about the committee, but it's amazing. They always seem to find a way. But when you look at it going forward, I think that's one of the reasons that, like, Saban got out, and it's gotten tougher. And you've seen, you know, older basketball coaches, even some Tony Bennett from Virginia, who's not an old guy, just got out of it. I just think it's such a different era that fans are going to have to adjust, and they will over time. But it's just like asking somebody to quit smoking. Going cold turkey is really, really tough, and you're going to have some withdrawals. And I think you're seeing that in Tuscaloosa right now and a couple other places. But this is the new norm. But isn't it great that you can now get away with a couple of losses and still have a chance? I mean, we're sitting here looking at Tennessee still with a chance at 10-2. A&M is 8-3, still got a chance to appear in the SEC championship game, not only make the playoff, but get a bye in the first round. That's why I told everybody it's going to make it more exciting. Games are going to mean more at the end of the year, but there is going to have to be an adjustment because Marie Antoinette's not going to be able to just get everything she wants anymore and some years they're going to send her to the guillotine.
Jake, as a G5 fan, and I know you coached at the G5 level down at South Alabama as well, I love the unmitigated chaos that we've got right now with the 12-team playoff. We still genuinely don't know, especially in that 7 through 12 range, who's going to get in. I mean, it's still completely up in the air. I love the chaos of a G5 potentially getting a top 4 seed in the first round bye. I love the very outside chance of a second G5 in Tulane possibly getting in, or at least jumping some SEC teams in the rankings. But my question for you is that going to lead Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti to want to expand this playoff again after 2025? Because it feels like those two men aren't the type to accept the chaos as an anomaly and just enjoy it like we do as fans, but will immediately make moves to get more of their teams in.
Well, look, I think they're going to see the amount of money and viewership this playoff gets, and they're going to expand it anyway, regardless of who's doing good and who's doing bad. It's, make no mistake, it's just like college really isn't built to educate you. They're businesses. They're built to make money. That's the exact same thing with college football. It's a billion-dollar industry, and they're going to keep expanding it if they can make more money. I don't know if you've ever seen the campaign with Will Ferrell and Zach Galifianakis, but it's like the Mach brothers. We're going to double the already tripled profits. That's what these guys do, and they're seeing the dollar signs roll in already. I mentioned the interest in the sport's never waning. As far as Greg Sankey and them getting upset about it, I think it would take multiple years. And what we have to see is we got to run this ground ball out a couple of years to see, hey, this may be an anomaly. I mean, this is the first year, and I don't think the switch just flipped that fast, that we don't have an elite team, in my opinion, or the one team we look at and we're like, all right, there they are. Can anybody catch them? Can anybody luck up enough to catch them? Which makes it a lot more fun. There's more teams that are alive. What I'm interested to see is, and what I would like, I can compromise with people on the top 4 conferences getting an automatic bid into the playoff. Not a bye necessarily, but an automatic bid to the playoff, the team that wins the conference championship game. I don't like giving away automatic bids if it's group of 5 or if it's power 4. To me, it should be the 12 best teams in the order that they finished the 12 best teams. You seed it according to that. That's what they do in the NCAA basketball tournament. You can win your conference tournament and get that automatic bid, but that don't mean you getting a 1 seed, buddy. Sometimes you're going to be a 16 seed and get your pants pulled down in front of God and everybody against Kansas in round 1. So at this point, I wish we just take the top 12 teams. If you want to give the teams that finish in the top 4 overall a bye, I mean, look at the rankings right now. You got Oregon 1, you got Ohio State 2, and I don't think anybody's complaining about that. I think those teams should get a bye, not just the team that comes out of the Big Ten Conference Championship game a winner.
Jake Crain and Company, I consume his content just about every single day, and you should as well. Jake, we talk a lot on our show about once Clemson's schedule got a little bit tougher the last 4 weeks or so, that they found it more difficult to score. They couldn't score really more than 24 points, and that's no disrespect to the Citadel because, let's be real, this isn't Risk, and I don't have the infantry or the defensive fortifications to hold off the angry cadets. But when they've played good defenses, Cade Klubnik, Antonio Williams, Adam Randall, Amari Rogers, and co., they aren't putting up those gaudy numbers like they had been before. And they're facing South Carolina this weekend, and they've got a zombie horde on defense. They're just going to keep coming and coming and coming at a beat-up Tiger O-line. How much trouble is Clemson in at noon on Saturday?
I just think South Carolina athletically and physically, and again, I can't believe I'm saying this because Clemson's normally very athletic and overtly physical, especially defensively. I don't think Cade Klubnik is going to be able to escape the speed of this South Carolina defense enough to be effective running the ball. I think their best shot is just Phil Maffa, whether it's the zone scheme, the gap scheme, counter, power, whatever. Now, it wouldn't be a bad idea to run Cade and get a hat on a hat truly, but just his ability to win in the havoc plays. I can make the argument Lenora Stellars, his best trait right now isn't that he can beat you from the pocket. It's when the play breaks down and turns into a scramble drill, he can either take off or that's when he makes some of his biggest plays. Just go back and look at their best moments. Go back and look at the Kentucky game. South Carolina creates havoc and they thrive in havoc on both offense and defense. Clemson, when you look at their personnel, and I think they got some young guys. The last couple of years, we've complained about the skill position around Cade Klubnik. Not that Cade has been perfect, but where's New Compton? Where's T. Higgins? Right? Where's Justin Ross? Where's Hunter Renfro? These guys that we're used to seeing on Clemson that are just as good as the best player out there. We haven't seen him at the skill position. I still think their best ball catcher and threat is Briningstool in the seam. I think he's a Sunday guy that doesn't get talked about enough. But as far as this matchup goes, I like the way that South Carolina, even though they didn't play great against Missouri, they still found a way to win a game. That says more to me than you going out there and beating somebody to death. I mean, you get up 21 points, it's easy to keep playing good because you're doing so well. It's when you're not at your best and you know you're not at your best and you still find a way to win. That's what impresses me. So going on the road is going to be a crazy environment. Both these teams, in my opinion, are still in the playoff hunt. It's not a great look. But if South Carolina wins, as crazy and as backwards as this is, you need to become huge Clemson fans because I think there's a chance Syracuse is going to beat Miami, which would put a Clemson team, even if they lost to South Carolina, into the ACC championship with a chance to make a playoff, which would be a lot better makeup for South Carolina to put on as far as the committee goes.
So, Jake, the playoff committee ranked South Carolina at 15 this week. I think that's a little unfair considering how they're playing right now, especially, you know, putting them around putting them, I think, underneath Ole Miss, who I think is ranked 14th right now. If you were re-ranking teams based solely on their second half of their season, where would South Carolina be?
Well, I mean, if we're basing them solely on the second half of the season, I think you would put them ahead of Ole Miss and Alabama. But I don't buy into that. I don't think that's the way we need to go about it. I think we need to look at every single game. I think, you know, games in September matter, right? Games in November matter. And you can be playing your best at the end, but if you didn't handle business early, then there needs to be a reward for people who did and were able to maintain that success, because I don't think that's fair to a team that's played good pretty much the whole year if you're only going to weigh the back half of it. So when I look at the way we should do this, strength of schedule, to me, should be 25%. I think, you know, subjectively, eye test should be 25%. I think scoring margin should be 25%, and win-loss record should be 25%. I think we should put it all in the pot. That's why I'm not going to sit here and argue with an 11-1 Indiana team getting in over a 9-3 team. Yeah, the 9-3 team may be playing better, but win-loss record has to matter. And if the strength of schedule is somewhat close, I don't know how you would differ from that. Now, as far as Ole Miss and South Carolina, Ole Miss beat them to death on their field. That matters to me when you have an even record and about the same strength of schedule, or maybe South Carolina's is a little bit better. Yes, Alabama only won by 2 at home. We can have a conversation about how well South Carolina played in that game, but if it comes down to either of those teams getting in, I've got to go with the head-to-head. So, you know, that's the long way of saying I think the whole year should matter. I think how you're playing right now should matter, right, if it comes down to the nitty-gritty and the margin of error. But, you know, after having coached whole season and know how it is scheduling, and these teams, some of these teams take chances early in the year, you should be rewarded for playing better for longer or winning games. That's why I think Boise State, say what you want, hate the G5 or not, they've looked awful the past couple weeks, including, you know, struggling with the Wyoming team, but they still only have one loss. So when you look around them, I can understand where they're at.
Yeah, Jake, we need to find a way, I think, to normalize or measure at least your performance against your relative strength of schedule, because if Clemson is playing a weak ACC schedule, not necessarily this year, but in most years, if they're going out there beating teams by 50 points every week, well, that's an impressive feat no matter who you're playing against, versus, you know, it's a 50-point win in the ACC equal to a 14-point win in the SEC in some way, shape, or form. Who's done a more impressive job in your mind turning it around than both Shane Beamer and Billy Napier? I mean, Florida fans were ready to go all Uncle Phil and throw Jazz out the front door of the porch. But both of these guys were put in a really tough spot going into the season, and even up and to and through weeks 4, 5, and 6. I guess I'm asking, who's going to challenge Clark Lee for SEC Coach of the Year?
Well, you know, I think Billy Napier was a lot closer to Dr. Evil hitting that button and sending him in the fire through the chair than Shane Beamer was. But it was starting to heat up a little bit for Shane. And I think Billy has DJ Lagway to thank for a lot of it, and DJ Lagway's father. And you see the way that he's playing right now, it seems like a pretty good decision, at least from where I'm sitting. Now, as far as you know, who's going to win Coach of the Year, you know, to me, this is the perfect year to have resurrected a team. It may not be sexy, but there's no Kirby Smart that went undefeated. There's no Nick Saban that's gone undefeated. or Brian Kelly and LSU going undefeated, which may never happen, by the way, with the way it's going down there. So if you're a coach that resurrected a place, this is the perfect year to win it. I don't know how you don't give it to Clark Lee. I don't know how you. Yeah. Vanderbilt beat Alabama. They could have just won that game and it'd have been fine. But they went on the road and they beat Auburn. Right? We saw what they did against Virginia Tech week 1. We saw what they were able to do, only losing by 3 to a Texas team where they were in the fight pretty much the whole game. I don't know how you do a better coaching job than what Clark Lee has done.
Jake, you and your brother Blaine are both unabashed Auburn fans. You've never shied away from talking about it and kind of viewing some things through that lens. You also do a really good job of turning that off when you need to. But Auburn has always, for the last 10 years or so, had real problems that you can look directly at and say, that's an issue. So from an Auburn fan that's good at spotting issues, what's actually going wrong at Alabama, if anything at all? And I realize that I'm putting you in the position as an Auburn fan to tell Alabama fans that everything's okay.
Yeah, well, like I say on my show, everybody's a fan of somebody. If anybody in sports media tells you they're not a fan of somebody, they're lying to you, or you should call the cops. Like I'll never understand that. As far as objective analysis, I did it for 10 years, 8 at the Division I level. Auburn, I didn't do it at Auburn. Auburn hadn't sent me a check yet, so I'm probably harder on them than anybody. But as far as diagnosing what's going on in Alabama, I think what you've seen, and this is one of the reasons I think Nick Saban got out of it, is kind of a cultural shift and an undisciplined nature just because of the evolution of the sport, right? I don't think you can do it the same way that Saban did it, the way he taught Kirby to do it. I think Dan Lanning has figured out that perfect balance. And with Kalen DeBoer, you're coming to a place at Alabama that was ran like the military, and now you're having to run it a little bit kind of like a frat house. So Alabama's doing things that we're not used to seeing, being undisciplined, even though, at the end of the Saban tenure, and I think this is another reason why he got out, we would see Alabama commit penalties and things like that. But as far as fundamental mistakes, being out of position, being in the wrong gap, busting coverages from an offensive line assignment, not being able to pick up exotic looks as far as a protection standpoint, being able to just not being able to line up and just run the ball. So we can sit here and I don't think Jalen Milroe's an elite quarterback. I don't think Jalen Milroe's a terrible quarterback. I think he's incredibly athletic and he's a rhythm shooter as a passer. We see this in basketball all the time. Sometimes slashers have good game shooting, and that's who Jalen Milroe is. But when he doesn't have the ability to slash, if you just rely on the shooting, most times it's not going to work out. It may work out for a half against Georgia, right? It may look good against Wisconsin for a game, but as far as the full season, it just, for Alabama, defensively is where I worry the most, though, because Alabama, we can talk about offensive adjustments, and sometimes you just don't have the personnel to fit what you're trying to do, and then when you try and adjust it, it takes away what you do best schematically. Defensively, they don't make any adjustments, and I know Crain personally. I coached at South Alabama. I know he knows how to adjust. It's like he doesn't trust the players to give them enough on the plate to adjust. That doesn't mean you can't run man-free if that's what you're best at. That doesn't mean you don't run two-man on 3rd and 8. But as far as against the run game, Oklahoma did a lot of the same elements, not only formationally, but schematically as far as the plays they run that Vanderbilt did. Go back and look at the formation identification on each play of Vanderbilt and Alabama on the most important plays. Oklahoma was lining up in that same diamond set and taking advantage of those same tendencies, which means Alabama either forgot about it, didn't see it coming, which is nuts because Oklahoma couldn't throw it from me to you if we were standing next to each other in a phone booth right now, and they weren't able to find a way out of it. So to me, I think you got a mixture of a lack of discipline, an inconsistent passing game. You're a little bit one-dimensional offensively, and then defensively, you don't make simple adjustments and learn from your mistakes. I don't care if you're at Alabama or Alabama A&M. That's basically winning fentanyl.
Jake, you kind of answered my question there. I was going to ask a follow-up. Is that a Kalen DeBoer problem or is that a player buy-in problem? It sounds like it's a little bit of both. Like maybe they don't fear Kalen DeBoer quite the same way that they did, or maybe they just haven't bought in quite the same way as they did with Nick.
Well, to me, look, the buck stops with the head coach. Maybe I'm old school. I'll never understand these people that are like, oh, it's not the coach's fault. It's the player's fault. Well, guess who brought in the players? You're either coaching it or you're allowing it to happen. There's a reason you sit in that position of power. There's a reason you get paid that type of money, because there's an expectation there. And whether it's you doing a bad job as far as scheme or hiring coaches, or you're doing a bad job of bringing in the right players to fit the scheme and system you want to run. Either way, the buck stops with you. So I'll never buy into this. Well, it's not the coach's fault. What a great gig. What a great gig that would be. Yes, pay me $10 million a year and don't blame me when the most important part of our team doesn't work. And those are the players. The guys I choose, the guys that I tell what to do. What an amazing gig that would be.
Jake, how attractive is the North Carolina job? Now that Mac Brown is gone, are they the type of program who can pull a Dan Mullen type of guy out of the TV studio, put him back on the sideline? I mean, they got resources. They've got brand power. I mean, I know it's more on the basketball side than the football side, but they've also got a lot less pressure to win at the highest of levels. Are the Tar Heels capable of hiring a Dan Mullen, or are they more of a go get John Summerall out of Tulane type of program?
No, look, I think John would be a great hire either way. Dan would too. Those were two of the three that I mentioned, and Jamie Chadwell was the last. Yeah, you just described the perfect job. They're the Kentucky football of the ACC. They've got a ton of money. You're in a power conference. They've got a fan base that'll care if you do well, but also if you win 8 games a year, you're a hero. So to me, it's the perfect job. I mean, we have people complaining about teams going 9-3. North Carolina would love to go 9-3. And they'd like you to do it quickly so they can go watch the basketball game later, even though what my Auburn Tigers did to them last night was the wire wider belt the butt for 2 halves, which is great to see in my opinion. But as far as the attractiveness of the job, it is a perfect scenario if you are an up-and-coming coach, too, that may have coached in the group of 5 for a while. You mentioned John Summerall, Jamie Chadwell. You go there and you win 8 games, then all of a sudden they're throwing rose petals at your feet and you're not paying for beer anymore.
I didn't mean, throwing John Summerall's name out there as a diss. I think he's a really good up and coming coach. He's just certainly less expensive.
The top of the top. Yeah,
right.
I totally get what you're saying.
Jake.
Look, is it gonna? I mean, the guys like Urban Meyer, right, and the guys that I would say like the Dan Lannings right now or the Kirby Smarts. I don't know if it would get that guy just because it's not viewed as, hey, I can win here as quickly as I can at a place like Georgia, because it isn't a quote-unquote football school, right? I think that's a real thing. It's just like the same reason some guys used to not want to coach at SEC basketball schools was because they wanted to go coach at North Carolina or Kansas or somewhere that's a basketball school. So I don't know as far as luring away a Kirby Smart type, but as far as getting in a guy that you could get on his come up and then keep him there and maybe find a way to keep him out of going to a Georgia, that's the type guy I think you can get.
Jake, when you need it, when you decide to finally get into politics, I will be your campaign manager for the position of sheriff of Fansville. It's going to be a tough campaign. Obviously, we got to take out the incumbent, Brian Bosworth, but I think you and I together can get it done. Thanks for your time today.
Look, I've already got 9 rules laid out, and 7 of them involve physical punishment. So I think we can get it turned around quick.
Have a great Thanksgiving, pal.
You're the best, buddy. Happy Thanksgiving to you, and happy holidays to everybody out there.
That's Jake Crain, host of Crain and Company on the Real Daily Wire. Look him up at Jake Crain _ on Twitter. Great guy, great interview. I hope you guys enjoyed that. When we come back, let's take a look around the sports world. What's happening out there? The whip around that we call our Daily Wires. Next on the Fan Upstate.
If you watch the Olympics with crumbs on your shirt and cheese dust on your fingers and say, I can do that, you're listening to The Right Show.
You're going wire to wire with Diesel and Cole Bryson on the Fan Upstate.
I'm Chuck Sanders. Here's the Sports Flash presented by Progressive. College football this Saturday. Number 12, Clemson battles at number 15, South Carolina. Bryce Young will be the starting quarterback for the Carolina Panthers this week. They host the Buccaneers on Sunday. Carolina's 3-8, 2-4 at home. Tampa 5-6 overall, 3-2 on the road. Paladins men's basketball 7-0 on the season after a 61-56 win over Seattle yesterday. 17 points, 12 rebounds for Cooper Bowser, 12 points for Nick Anderson. Next up, a huge battle this Saturday against number 1 Kansas. Gamecocks are 8-3, the Tigers 9-2. Clemson basketball 75-67 winners over Penn State yesterday. The Tigers are 7-1. Tonight, South Carolina basketball squares off with Virginia Tech. Classic Rock 101.1 is your home for Carolina Panthers play-by-play all season long. Download the Odyssey app, search the Fan Upstate, and listen anywhere on your phone. I'm Chuck Sanders with the Sports Flash on the Fan Upstate.
From the Ingles Market Studio.
Tigers, Gamecocks, Panthers, Paladins, and Rebels. Punch your ticket to the best local sports. 97.7 FM Greenville, 97.1 FM Spartanburg. Always streaming wherever you are on the Odyssey app.
Upstate.
This holiday season, Straight Talk Wireless is letting you say yes a lot more with real unlimited data. Yes to sharing pics of the ugliest holiday sweaters. Yes to checking weather on the go for surprise sledding trips. And with a free phone at sign up, let the yes-tivities begin.
No way!
Yes way. Straight Talk, real unlimited data. Available at Walmart or straighttalk.com. Offer valid through 1/5/25 while supplies last at participating stores. Taxes and fees apply. Requires in-store activation on select single line plans. Limit of 2 phones per customer. For network management practices, visit straighttalk.com.
What's up, sandwich heads? Today on Steve-O's Sandwich Reviews, we've got the tips and tricks to the best sandwich order. And it all starts with this little guy right here. Pepsi Zero Sugar. Partial to pastrami, craving a Cubano. Yeah, sounds delicious, but boom! Add the crisp, refreshing taste of Pepsi Zero Sugar and cue the fireworks. Lunch, dinner, or late night, it'll be a sandwich worth celebrating. Trust me, your boy's eaten a lot of sandwiches in his day, and the one thing I can say with absolute fact, every bite is better with Pepsi.
Guys, it's finally here. Wendy's new salted caramel frosty. It's cold, salted, yet perfectly sweet, delicious, and it's at the top of Santa's Christmas list. What? Santa has a list too, you know. And he's a huge salted caramel frosty fan. Probably why he's so jolly all the time. The iconic frosty with a salted caramel twist? Gotta be Wendy's.
Limited time only at participating U.S. Wendy's. Salted caramel frosty flavored with other natural flavors.
Get into the holiday spirit and listen to The Christmas Station, Magic 106.3, for all the sounds of the season, from Mariah to the holiday classics.
It's the most.
Plus, keep rocking around the Christmas tree no matter where you are with Magic 106.3 on the free Odyssey app. Turning your home into a winter wonderland? Ask your smart speaker to play Magic 106.3. Enjoy the holiday season your way on the radio, on your smart speaker, and on the free Odyssey app.
Leave your namby-pamby sports takes at the door. Call in if you're man enough.
844 fan phone. This is Wire to Wire with Diesel and Cole Bryson on the Fan Upstate.
$5,000 for the remainder of the season. Sources had told ESPN's Adam Schefter that Daniel preferred to sign with a playoff contender, which, of course, everybody wants to sign with a playoff contender, but that's especially good for the Vikings because going into the trade, the Vikings just had J.J. McCarthy, the rookie who's been out for the majority of the season, under contract for the 2025 season. So, you'll have a quarterback battle going into next year. J.J. obviously not spending the entire season out there on the field. You can learn what you can learn in the classroom and by watching film, but you really can't get any better until you're out on the field playing. So the Vikings are definitely going to be in big need for a quarterback next year. And at least they've got a good depth guy. If JJ shows himself to be the quality quarterback that they thought he was when they drafted him there inside the top 10, then JJ McCarthy will be the quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings next year. But if that's not the case and JJ maybe gets a little bit of a slow start, they can certainly throw Daniel Jones out there to bridge that gap. In baseball, the rich are getting richer. The Dodgers have reached an agreement with Blake Snell, a 5-year, $182 million contract. The deal includes no opt-outs, some deferred money, and a $52 million signing bonus. So look at that. The Dodgers just cheating some more, bending the rules of the salary cap. They got to be paying a ton of money in luxury tax to be able to put deals like this on the table. Live Golf is expected to hire former NBA and NHL executive Scott O'Neill to replace Greg Norman as its CEO and commissioner. If a deal is finalized, an announcement will come as early as next week. For those of you who are into fantasy, this is important for you. Chargers running back J.K. Dobbins suffered a sprained MCL and is expected to be out on Sunday against the Atlanta Falcons. Dobbins will be week to week moving forward. And lastly here for you, Conor McGregor will no longer be the face of the Irish whiskey brand Proper Number 12 after he was found liable in a sexual assault case last week in Dublin. Proper Number 12, which he himself founded in 2018, told the Irish Independent on Tuesday that it would no longer be associated with Conor McGregor. He sold his stake back in 2021, but it continued as the public face of the brand. Those are your daily wires. When we come back, let's jump right into the Upset Picks Challenge. Half a dozen or so, or a dozen picks have already come in today. Want to get you the standings, some of the biggest movers and shakers over this past week, and of course, give you one more plea to get your upset picks our way. That's coming up next, right here on 97.7 FM in Greenville, 97.1 FM in Spartanburg, and everywhere you are on the free Odyssey app.
on the Fan Upstate.
Cannot thank you, Tolos, enough for making the Wire to Wire Upset Picks Challenge, brought to you by Ingles, the biggest and best year we've ever had in this challenge. We've already just blown last year's challenge out of the water with the total number of picks that we've had, with the number of picks who are here each and every week, and of course with the total number of points. I mean, our leader right now, our dear leader, Twisted Whisker, has 72 points in the Upset Picks Challenge, which is absurd to think that last year 40 points won this thing. He's almost doubled the number of picks, which means he's either hitting on these massive ones or he's hitting every single week, which is nuts. I don't know how Twisted Whisker is doing it, but it's the Wire to Wire Upset Picks Challenge. We go to the phone lines right now, bring on Delvin. It's not official until Delvin gets in his upset pick. Who you liking this week, Delvin, and why? Delvin, you there?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Who do you like this week?
Give me Oregon State plus 19 over Boise State.
Oregon State plus 19. It sounds like, Delvin, I caught you in the middle of eating a turkey sandwich.
Yeah, you caught me a little bit. I was watching TV.
What are we having, Delvin? What's lunch today?
No, just make me a sandwich. That's all.
Oh, okay. Well, hey, man, 25 Garlington Road. I'd love a sandwich too if you got time.
Yeah. The reason I'm going with, I know that's probably high plus 19, but I saw Boise State play struggle against a 2-win Wyoming team last week.
Yeah. I mean, I think, Delvin, all these really, really good teams, they all have that one game where they kind of stumble just a little bit, where they stub their toes just a little bit. I can't see Boise State doing that 2 weeks in a row, but
I can't, because I think that they don't got their one-man show, man. If you start the running game, and Gentry was hurt last week, you're not healthy. If you start here before that quarterback to throw, I saw him play last week. Trust me, he can't get it done. I don't think he can get it done.
All right, Delvin.
And I think Oregon State got momentum coming off a big win over Washington State.
That's true. The Pac-2, man, that's bragging rights every single week when you went out there. Delvin, appreciate the phone call.
Yeah, thank you for my call.
Yep, that is Delvin. I'm trying to find Delvin on this list. I know that he finally hit a couple of weeks ago, and I think maybe Delvin has made a big push the last couple of weeks. I'm trying to find him. And by the way, you can always go check out the most recent standings on the Fan Upstate's Twitter, at the Fan Upstate. You do not need a Twitter account to log in and look at that. Trying to find Delvin on this list. This is hard, man. Trying to find a needle in a haystack while you're trying to talk and do a live radio show. But I know Delvin has points. He's in there somewhere. And I don't know, man. I know that Ashton Genty is an absolute beast this year, and he very well deserves consideration for the Heisman Trophy. But I can't see Boise State falling, not falling, but just looking bad 2 weeks in a row. I genuinely don't see that happening. But, hey, anything can happen, man. Upset picks are wild out there. You got games that you think are definitely going to hit that don't, and games that have, on paper, no chance of hitting, and they do. So I want to look at the last couple of games for both of these teams. Oregon State won 41-38 against Washington State, another garbage program that, man, life was good when Washington State's good. Life is good when Oregon State is good. But the Beavers are 5-6, and before their big win against Washington State, they had lost 5 in a row. Now, they can score some points. That's not their problem. Oregon State can score some points. They put up 37 on Nevada, 25 on UNLV. They got blanked by Air Force. That's rough. They did not acquit themselves well against San Jose State or Cal either. But hey, maybe they ride some of that momentum. Maybe a 5-6 team, David, takes down the Boise State Broncos, Goliath, who are 10-1. Interesting choice, Delvin. So how this works, if you Tolos are unaware, the game is picking an upset. Now, normally you think that's kind of easy. I think I could pick the underdog. It's a lot harder than you think it is. So go to ESPN.com. That's the website we use for our official picks and odds creation. Find a game where the betting underdog you think has a chance to win the game outright. For example, like Delvin, you could take Oregon State plus 19 over Boise State. You could take Utah State plus 6 over Colorado State. That's not actually a bad game, because Utah State's 4-7, Colorado State's 7-4. When you get in that kind of range, anything could happen. Find a game where you think the betting underdog will win the game outright, and then text me, 71307. Start your text with the word fan, and then give me your name, your game, and the spread. So, for example, Just Jess texts in. Her text reads, fan. Nebraska +6 versus Iowa. Just Jess. That's the format you got to use. Clemson Oculus says he wants Syracuse +11 over Miami. That's been a very, very popular one. Clemson Oculus. Texter says, where's my boy at today? Tell him to get his ass back to work. I assume you're talking about Cole. I didn't know Cole's dad listened to the show. Right on. But Texter, he's probably in a field somewhere, in a bush somewhere. I know he was doing some deer hunting today. I don't know if the plan is to clean it and have it on the Thanksgiving table tomorrow, but he's out in the field doing some hunting. So thank you, Clemson Oculus, for getting your pick in. 71307, give us your name, your game, and your spread. Want to go over the standings here for just a couple of seconds to help you guys out. Twisted Whisker is in first place with 72 points. Noel has 70.5. He's in second place. John Dog in third with 56.5. Fourth place, you just heard him in the 3 o'clock hour on this very show. Jake Crain from Crain and Company. He is at 50.5 points. I don't know if Jake has some huge analytics powerhouse behind him, smart guy, or just a computer crunching numbers for him, but Jake always does well in this challenge. We have Josh Pate, who joins us occasionally on the show. He definitely has analytics behind him, and he's all the way down in 28th place. So maybe that's not really worth much. But T-Ray has 48.5. Reed Atkins has 46.5, as does Joe D. and Clemson Oculus. Justin L. has 46. Billy Horn has 43. Anybody? Oh, by the way, Delvin has 18 points, and he is in 45th place. And Delvin is a testament to sticking with it, because a lot of Tolos, we get to week 11, 12, 13 of the season, and you start dropping off like flies. And that's a loser's mentality. I don't believe in that. I think if you drop off by the end of the season and we don't hear from you like 3 weeks in a row, you got to lose 10 points, because your charge is to be here every single week. And the truth is, you can have an awful first half of the season and then come charging back in the second half. Delvin is a prime example of that. Harold is a great example of that. Harold didn't even get into the challenge until week number 7. And Harold's up in 40th place out of how many Tolos have points right now? 112 Tolos have points right now. And there's a bunch of Tolos who don't have any points at all, who have been in this challenge. Dan B has told me there's somewhere in the range of 230, 250 Tolos who have made picks this season. So think about that. Only half even have points. So being in the top half who have points is a pretty good thing. You're going to need some help if you want to reach me up there at 33 points. I'm in 21st place. Not to toot my own horn, but toot. Mason Brew has 23 points. Kevin Buggs has 22.5. Gravy, whose name we can't read his full name on the air because it's too graphic. He has 22 points. Gravy is the one who came in and on his very first upset pick decided to roll with Kennesaw State, a winless FBS program. Not a team, not this year's team, but winless against FBS teams in program history. And he hit, taking Kennesaw State over the then undefeated Liberty Flames. They got 26 points for it. I think he's hit one more time since then. So that's proof right there that you can get into this challenge late and make some noise. You can get into it right now just for fun, just to get the hang of it, so that next year when we do this challenge, and by the way, next year, I promise you that we're going to have prizes for this challenge. Promise you. You're going to want to know how this thing works, okay? Because next year we're going to get some prizes for this. My goal is a first, second, third, tiered level prize packs, having a prize for whoever finishes last, who actually still has points, which right now would be Shane Connick of the Charlotte Observer with half a point. And I want to do one prize for an Iron Man, somebody who's picked in every week. We may say, hey, you could take a week off, but like we want you picking every single week. Like losing a point for a wrong pick is I think fair. Losing 2 points for not picking at all is fair, but it doesn't seem to be enough for a lot of you Tolos who just disappear by the end of the season. Jonathan Brooks on the web stream. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, by the way. Jonathan Brooks says, I asked my daughter how things are going with her new pilot boyfriend. She said their relationship was up in the air. It's funny, Jonathan. It's funny. It's funny. See, you even got Ben to laugh. Ben notoriously doesn't laugh at anything. You even got him. I know.
I can't not now.
Such a stupid joke.
Now that I'm a dad.
Such a stupid joke.
Got to.
Madcraft says, Bulldogs already have trouble breathing. If enough jackets get a sting in that dog's going down. Madcraft, you realize what you've done. You could get me talking for a half an hour about brachiocephalic dogs, and I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. By the way, Tolos, where are you listening to us from? We had some Tolos texting in earlier during the Rob Brown show, and we had a Tolo call in right at the beginning of our show and say that they were picking up a lot of like feedback, a lot of static on 97.7, the over-the-air signal in Greenville. Is anybody listening to 97.7 in Greenville? Is it working? Is it staticky? Is this thing even on? That's a good question. Let me know, 71307, because I don't know the condition of our stream right now. Jonathan Brooks says Duncan. He's listening from Duncan, which you're kind of right there in between the 97.7 and the 97.1, Jonathan. Can you let us know if 97.7, if you can normally pick that one up there in Duncan, if it's working for you today? It's Wire to Wire with Diesel and Cole Bryson. Justin L. taking Memphis plus 14 over Tulane. Dion taking Oregon State plus 17 over Boise State. So, Dion, you're rolling with Delvin on this one. Reed Atkins taking Utah plus 10 over UCF. And Roger Carper wants Texas A&M plus 5.5 over Texas. Good news for you, Roger Carper, is that game is actually worth 6, maybe even 6.5, because we always screenshot the spreads. Normally it's on Wednesdays at 3:00, but because of the holiday, because myself and Cole Bryson are not going to be here Thursday and Friday, we moved everything up a day. So we screenshot the spreads yesterday at 3:00, and that's what we're going with. So don't worry if you're not familiar with the challenge. You always get the points that were locked in as of 3:00. So if it's moved up a point or down a point or a half a point or whatever, you're going to get the same number of points. Everybody who picks the exact same game is going to get the exact same number of points. So texters are telling us 97.7 has a lot of static. Reed Atkins confirms. Another texter on top of that confirms that as well. Says 97.1 is good in Spartanburg, but 97.7 in Greenville is all static. Well, that makes some sense there. That makes some sense. If we are off the air in Greenville, but we're rocking loud and clear in Spartanburg, that's making some sense. But that's also not an excuse. Not an excuse for you Tolos, because we always talk about the Odyssey app all the time. Talk about the Odyssey app all the time, and I'm actually going to walk to it on my phone here and show you how awesome the Odyssey app is. See, there's the Odyssey app, got the ring light on it, and you search for the Fan Upstate, bam, it goes right there as recently played. It's super easy. You just click that little button right there. Boom, you're listening to the Fan Upstate everywhere you go. So not being able to hear it over the air is not an excuse. We're not accepting picks that come in on Thursday and Friday. Just want to let you know that. So those of you who are listening, you're smart. You guys are going to get a chance maybe to score some points, whereas other people who aren't paying attention, they may lose points because they're not picking on Tuesday and Wednesday like they've been instructed to. So there you go. That's the upset picks standings as of right now. We had a lot of movement, by the way, inside the middle of the pack. Buckeye Bryan, I believe, was the one who did it. Buckeye Bryan hit this week, and he jumped from like 75th place to 25th place. That's what I'm talking about. You hit one or two, bam, you're up there in the top half, top third. Picking upsets is hard. It's really, really hard. Maybe not for Twisted Whisker, Noel, John Dog, and T-Ray, but it's really, really hard. So there's still time for you to make things up. And by the way, just to remind everybody, here's how we're doing picks in and around bowl season and the playoff games, first round and the quarterfinals. So we'll do this week's games, obviously. We're picking right now. Next week, or the week leading up to conference championship games, we'll pick all of those as a bundle, conference championship games. Then we'll have the pre-Christmas bowl games, which also includes the first round college football playoff games. That's the on-campus round. And then we'll have post-Christmas games, which will include the quarterfinals. Once you get past that, once we get into the semifinals, you only got, 2 games to choose from, and that's not fun. That's not fun. So we're going to cut this thing off at the quarterfinals, which will again be wrapped up in a lot of the pre and post Christmas bowl games, and we'll have fun. And hopefully somebody knocks off Twisted Whisker, because by God, the dude cannot miss. I don't understand it. When we come back, we'll talk to a dude who does not miss, Kelley Ford of KFordRatings.com. You are maybe a little up in the air about what pick you're going to make in the Upset Picks Challenge. Well, we'll talk to Kelley Ford next, and maybe, just maybe, he can provide some insight on whatever game it is you're trying to pick. 71307, text in if you got something to say, or just sit right there. We'll talk to Kelley Ford next on the Fan Upstate.
71307. Keyword fan.
And connect with Diesel and Cole Bryson on Wire to Wire. This is the Fan Upstate.
Talking college football, all things, especially when it comes to the numbers, with Kelley Ford of K Ford Ratings, joins us at this time each and every week right here on the Fan Upstate. Kelley, right out of the gate, can you explain to me why the CFP by the numbers has South Carolina at number 15? I know in your most deserving rankings, you have them just a little bit higher than that. And maybe I'll ask you a question that you can't answer with the numbers, but maybe just more by feel. If we were just looking at the last half of the South Carolina Gamecocks season, where do you think they would stack up, whether it be in the rankings or in your most deserving?
Yeah, so for South Carolina, let me take that one first. If we look at them in recent weeks, over the course of the season, I've had South Carolina upgraded more than 9 points per game in my model. That's top 10 nationally. If you look at just the last month, they're up about a field goal. That's top 15 nationally. So certainly in the last month, South Carolina is playing some really, really good football, especially relative to what the model expected. You haven't lost a game since Alabama. So certainly, in the last month, you're going to be ranked very highly if that's all we're looking at. You've asked, though, what do I make of the committee having South Carolina ranked a little bit too low? I think South Carolina is underranked by about 2 spots, and I think it's magnified by the fact that their opponent this weekend, Clemson, is overranked by my numbers by about 7 spots. So I would have these two flipped. In the most deserving, I have South Carolina 13, Clemson number 19. The committee has them Clemson 12, South Carolina 15. So I don't know why the committee has them where they do. I think South Carolina has a very impressive resume. I would have them as one of the very first couple teams out of my projected bracket. Certainly, though, the winner of this game is going to feel very good about their chances to be an at-large bid. Of course, Clemson still has that chance to make it to Charlotte and be the AQ potentially from the ACC as well. Diesel, I see you talking, and I cannot hear you.
I think that might have fixed
it. Now I got you.
Okay.
I got you. Yep.
Producer Ben has to be here. He can't take a day off. So, Kelley, I'm loving the new How Did the Committee Do graphic. Today was the first time I actually spotted that on your website. You were just talking about it there for a second. You still see Indiana as 3 spots underranked. And I know that the college football viewing world saw that blowout loss to Ohio State as proof that Indiana sucks, that they had no business being there, but you still have them as 3 spots underranked. Tell me why.
I do. So when you look at Indiana's resume relative to the rest of college football, going into last week, I had the Hoosiers at number 7. The committee had them at number 5, I believe. So I thought last week the committee had too much respect for the undefeated Indiana Hoosiers coming out of the game against Ohio State, which they did lose by a few touchdowns and were clearly the inferior team in that game. I actually didn't have Indiana drop in my most deserving rankings. They stayed at number 7. That doesn't mean their resume didn't change. It did. Texas and Miami leapfrogged the Hoosiers based on the wins that they had and what they added to their resume. But at the same time, Alabama and BYU fell behind Indiana because they suffered more damaging losses to their resume than Indiana did with that loss to Ohio State on the road, I'd add. So Indiana, for me, still number 7 in the most deserving. I have them number 11 in the model. Based on the bracket that the committee has shown us and what it would be, I would have just a 1% chance that Indiana would win the national championship, given their relative strength of the field and then how the seeding shook out. So yeah, the committee has them at number 10 with a number 10 ranked, number 11 seeded. I have Indiana number 7 ranked, number 9 seeded based on their resume.
So Kelley, we've had a very subjective argument since basically college football began, but especially since we've moved away from the BCS, we've moved away from the raw numbers, and now we're in opinion time, right? And everybody argues, well, the value of a win in the SEC versus a value of a win in the ACC or a different conference. How does your model account for your performance relative to what the model expects you to do against a certain team? And I'm not using anything directly off of your website, but just for example, if Clemson should beat a Wake Forest by 28 points and they beat them by 35, is that equal to a 7-point win against a team in the SEC, for example?
Yeah. So the more you went there, Diesel, the more convoluted that question got. I'll try to break it down into really two simple ways. One is, yes, the model going into every single game has an expectation of each team playing in that game. If you perform better than the model's expectation, and oftentimes that does relate to a scoring margin, but that's really not what's driving it. It's really performance from an efficiency, down by down, drive by drive, offense, defense, special teams. How efficient were you against your opponent relative to what the model expected? If you were more efficient than the model expected, your power rating is going to improve. Even if you lose the game, if you were more efficient than the model expected, your power rating will improve. If you were less efficient than expected, even if you won the game, your power rating will go down. So that's how the model, because that's what the model is. The model's a power rating. That's how it accounts and adjusts for the expectation that your team had versus what was expected in that game given that opponent. Now, how do we then quantify, if you will, the value of a win? So for me, it's very, very simple. I use the number 12 power rated team as my denominator, as my common lens. You have to pick a common lens. You can pick whatever common lens you want. I have picked number 12 power rated because we have the 12 team playoff. And so to me, it makes intuitive sense to go with the number 12 team in the denominator. So what we can do is look at every single team's schedule and say, how would the number 12 power rated team be expected to do against this schedule with regard to a win-loss record? And so, okay, great. Every single team schedule we view through that lens, every single team now has the denominator based on their schedule. Now in the numerator for every team is how did you do against your own schedule? So now you can compare how did I do against my schedule relative to how the number 12 power rated team would have been expected to do against my schedule. So for all 134 teams, you come up with this fraction. And for the better teams, the teams that have a better resume, I should say, that number is going to be greater than 1. If you have a less than average or less than top 12 power rate or top 12 resume ranked resume, I should say, you're going to have a value that is less than 1. And so by normalizing everybody's schedule, viewing it through that common lens, we can see how much did you achieve relative to expected. That's how then I can produce the most deserving rankings. And you really don't have to get into defining the value of a win in the SEC versus the value of a win in the ACC versus the value of the win in any conference, because you're looking at every single schedule through the same lens and saying, okay, here's what would be expected of you against that schedule. Now, how have you actually done?
Kelley, you would not be the first person who's ever told me that I took a long walk to get to a short drink of water, but you understood where I was trying to go, and that's why we bring you on the show, because you're a smart fella. Tell me, does your model, do you do if-then scenarios for future predictive scheduling? For example, if Clemson were to win on Saturday versus if South Carolina were to win on Saturday, what do you think happens to their power rankings and to their most deserving status in their rankings?
So remember, I'm going to take the first question first. From a power rating standpoint, the win-loss doesn't necessarily matter. It's how did they play relative to the expectation. Yes, oftentimes teams that play to the level or exceed the level of expected are going to win. Oftentimes, it's not always the case. Teams that fail to live up to that level oftentimes lose. Not always the case. So it's impossible for me to guess how either of these teams' power rating is going to change until we see how the game plays out. Like it's quite literally impossible. It's very reasonable to assume that at this stage of the season, they're probably, even with a great performance or a terrible performance, they're not going to go up or down more than about 2 points in the model right now, based on where we are in the season and the amount of data that we have. And adding one game won't change it too much to that regard. Now you ask, can you project where they're going to be in the most deserving? I can. However, it's more helpful if we have like the whole scenario laid out. Okay, so Clemson wins and Texas wins and Alabama wins, right? Like you have to give me these whole scenarios and you can say, okay, here's how everybody's most deserving change based on that. I will say that the model is the most deserving ranking formula is going to look very kindly on the winner of this game. The loser of this game is not really going to be punished too much because these are two really good power rated teams. I have South Carolina number 12, Clemson number 13. It's at Clemson, so Clemson's going to be the favorite in this game by my model because of that home field advantage. But the winner of this game is going to get a top 13 power rated win. And for South Carolina, it'd be on the road, which is even more impressive. The loser of this game has lost to a top 13 power rated team. You are not going to be hurt too much. The winner has a lot to gain. The loser should not fall too much in the most deserving. So again, The loser is probably out of the CFP. Yes, and my own most deserving would agree with that. The winner, I kind of want to say they're in, at least from my perspective. Will the committee vault South Carolina way up there? Maybe not, but they would have a resume that, based on my numbers, would certainly merit at a minimum consideration for an at-large bid.
Find him at kfordratings.com, at kfordratings on Twitter. Kelley Ford joins us on the Fan Upstate. One of our diehard Tolos, Madcraft, big-time Miami fan. He wants your thoughts on the Miami-Syracuse head-to-head matchup, and he also asks, does Kelley think Miami is on upset alert? And does Clemson make it even if they lose to South Carolina? So you just answered the last part of that question there. But is Miami on upset alert against Syracuse?
Yeah, Clemson is out with a loss, I believe, and I think the committee would agree with that. I've seen a couple of people ask about this Miami-Syracuse game. Miami fans are a little worried. I like Miami to win the game. 82% win expectancy. That's more than a one-possession expected result here. Syracuse is number 57 in my power ratings. Now, they do have a very good offense coming in at number 24. The Miami defense has struggled a little bit. They're power rated number 39, so that's not terrible, but this Miami offense is number 1 in the country for me. That Syracuse defense is number 84. I don't think Syracuse is going to be able to get enough stops. That's why I have Miami with this 82% win expectancy. I will say that, in the last decade, maybe not even that much, 7 or 8 years, which again, that's a big sample size, Syracuse has pulled off a couple upsets, especially at home. I think Clemson was the victim of one of those, even in you guys' market there. But Miami fans, listen, you got to take them serious because Syracuse is a decent enough team. They're top 60 power rated. They're at home. They want to ruin your season, but you should win this game, Miami. And my model expects that. Miami with a win is certainly going to be feeling very good. Is an 11-2 Miami that loses to SMU in the ACC championship game in? I think it depends on what other teams look like, and how is the committee going to punish, if at all, teams that lose in their conference championship game. Certainly, if Miami loses this one, well, they're out. I mean, they'd be out of the ACC because then Clemson is in there. So, yeah, this is huge for Miami. I expect them to win, and the upset alert meter should be on, but relatively low.
Kelley, you have Arizona State, or you project them in as the 12 seed in your playoff bracket, the actual number 16 in the rankings as the projected Big 12 champ. They've been just a massive surprise this year, the Arizona Sun Devils. I think they were picked last to finish in the Big 12 conference. Convince me of why the Sun Devils might be more competitive in a hypothetical matchup against number 2 Ohio State, which is what you have in your bracket projections.
So that's actually Diesel. That's on the CFP page. That's what the committee's current bracket looks like. For me and my most deserving, I do have Arizona State in the field as the 4th of the 5 AQs that get in. So I have Arizona State currently with the bye. I have them most deserving ranked number 14. The committee has them 16. So I would flip Arizona State and Boise State. But to answer your question, yes, Arizona State's had an incredible year. They're actually my number 1 biggest overachievers this year with regard to win-loss expectation through this point of the season. They just after beating BYU last week, they have surpassed BYU in that metric. BYU is now number 2 on that list. Arizona State has been upgraded 9.5 points since the start of the year. That's number 7 nationally. In the last month, they're up more than 4 points. That's number 5 nationally. And even in the last 2 weeks, they've picked up a couple great wins at Kansas State and home to BYU. They're up almost 2 points. That's top 15 nationally. So Arizona State is certainly surging. They're a team that's done really, really well in one-possession games. As I quickly tallied up here, they are 6-1 in one-possession games. That oftentimes means a team is not quite as good as their record indicates. I do have them number 14 in the most deserving, but they're only power rated number 33. So I do think Arizona State has a very strong resume. However, you want to talk about being on upset alert. Rivalry game here, Territorial Cup, I believe it's called, at Arizona, 66% win expectancy for the Sun Devils. They need this one if they're going to get into Arlington, and many people, including myself, think that is their only path to the playoff.
Kelley, I'm looking at your watchability scores here, and I know that these are a little bit old. I think I'm looking at your old watchability score graphic here for week number 13. But the question still stands. What's the difference in your mind between a 9.4 in the watchability scale and a 9.2 in the watchability scale? Because people are going to have a hard time. Not everybody is fancy with an array of televisions like you have in your man cave. Some people like me are still kicking it old school with one game on one TV, maybe a cell phone down on the table beside me. But how do you parse those numbers between two games that are that close?
Yeah. So first, Diesel, man, my condolences. We got to get you another screen, brother. It makes for a good experience, I'll tell you what. But no, in all seriousness, yes, the watchability page gets updated every Friday. So that's why you're seeing last week's. It hasn't been updated for this week. But the difference between a 9.4 and a 9.2 is not much. So what I'm doing with watchability is I am normalizing and scaling how what I call watchable every single game involving an FBS team is. Now, how am I defining watchability? Because it's different than how a lot of people define watchability. Mine has nothing to do with TV ratings, projected or real. Mine has nothing to do with the brands or the logos of the teams involved. Mine has nothing to do with the college football playoff or conference championship game races. None of that. Many people, that's how they watch games. They want to watch the ranked teams. That's great. That is not what I am doing with watchability. What I am doing is two factors, and they are not equally weighted, but this is a weighted score on a 0 to 10 scale of the projected quality of the two teams involved. So what is their average K Ford power rating? And then the projected competitiveness of that game. So what is the projected K Ford spread? If you have high quality teams, so projected high quality, and a game that has a one possession spread or a close spread, single digit spread, you're going to score highly in watchability. If you have one of those and not the other, or you don't have either of those, your watchability score goes down from a 10.0 to a 0.0 on that scale. So the difference between a 9.4 and a 9.2 or a 9.1 and an 8.8 is really not that much. It's just that's how I've determined I'm going to define watchability and put together this viewing guide that really started as a guide for me with my setup, as you've seen and as you know. And as I said, man, I'm making this anyway. I'll share it with others, and people have latched on and really enjoyed it. Now, that doesn't mean they don't quibble about which game is number one and number two and all that. And I'm like, to your point, like, guys, it's really not that big of a difference. And if you want to watch the game that ranks second in that window, by all means, go ahead. I'm not coming into your house and making you watch the one that I said.
Kelley, I love when people argue with the numbers that you post up on your social medias, and you do a good job staying out of the fray. What surprises you the most that fans who, let's be real, can be pretty twitchy, right? You say you don't say that their team is the best team in the history of college football and would beat the Kansas City Chiefs. You obviously hate their team, but what graphic or metric that you post about really gets people fired up the most that you wouldn't have really expected would do just that?
Man, that's a good question.
All of them?
All of them get people fired up. But it's really the power ratings, because at this stage of the year, right, I have Alabama number 3 in the model, and people are like, "Oh my gosh, no way! How do you have a 3-loss Alabama there?" But I'm used to that one by now. I'm trying to think as I go through my other content here. People get upset with the college football playoff stuff that I post, and you say I do a good job of staying out of the fray. I really try to. I mute a lot of accounts. I mean, if I see something, I take a second, I mute it, and I just move on. Every now and then I will clap back. And then Diesel, it's like I'm the bad guy. They're like, "Oh my gosh, Kelley's going." I'm like, wait a minute. Guys, or if I like, okay, last week, watchability, just last week, and you mentioned the week 13, it's still on the website because I update it on Fridays. I had Ole Miss and Florida at a 9.4 in the early window. I had Indiana and Ohio State at a 9.2 in the early window. So 9.4, 9.2, we already talked about that. That's not a big difference, right? But to me, I had Ole Miss, Florida, based on my criteria. Projected team strength, projected quality of the game, or competitiveness of the game, I should say, as a slightly better game. A lot of people had a problem with that, and they let me know it, and I just let it go. I didn't even do anything. But then the games play out, and Florida ends up pulling off the upset in what was a pretty competitive game, and Ohio State kind of runs away from Indiana in a game that wasn't very competitive, even though it was a, quote, top 5 matchup. So I quote tweeted my watchability post and said, interesting. A lot of people told me that this top 5 matchup was certainly going to be a better game than this Florida Ole Miss game. Interesting. Like, that's all I said. I just said interesting or weird, something like that. And a lot of people said, nobody likes someone who gives an I told you so. Oh, this. And I'm like, wait a minute now. Everybody gave me crap for what I posted. I come in, not even calling anybody out, just saying, hey, here's how they played out. I guess I probably did okay. And they're like, oh, nobody likes a know-it-all. Nobody. Well, nobody's coming back to say they were wrong about the original post. So nobody's ever given me credit, which again, I'm not on there for credit. That's not why I'm doing it. But no one's ever going out of their way to give me credit. So if I don't stand up for myself every now and then, no one's going to. So I did, and then people got mad about that. And I'm like, I can't win with these people. That's why I try to stay out of the fray. But yeah, every now and then I do clap back, and then I'm the big bad guy who's got, the number of followers. You're picking on this guy. And I'm like, no, this guy's being a jerk to me in my replies. All I'm doing is responding. Like, it is what it is, Diesel.
Kelley, it never fails. You go back and you read your YouTube comments, which, by the way, don't. In case I don't know, I don't know how active you are on YouTube, or back in the day, bands would say never go back and read your reviews because you're never going to get the review that you want. Somebody will always take something that you say out of context, or they'll just go rogue off road to try to light you up. Kelley, we're 24 hours away. I don't know if your family is doing Thanksgiving lunch or if you're doing Thanksgiving dinner. So you're either 24 hours away from dealing with your food coma or just about to create your food coma. So Kelley, I'm going to paint a picture here for you. Mm-hmm. You've had your first plate of food, which everybody tries to get a little bit of everything, right? In your family, what are you going back for on your second trip to the table? If the first thing you're gonna scoop onto your plate for a second helping, what is it in your family?
Yeah, definitely. So for me, that's going to be stuffing, and most likely, like I'd love to say it's not the case, but let's just be real, it is. It's pumpkin pie, like stuffing and pumpkin pie on the round 2, and I probably already had some in round 1, like you said. Those are the things that I'm going to be going back for. Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday. It's always been my favorite holiday. I absolutely love the fact that we've got football going on. It's rivalry week of the college football season, which is my favorite week of the entire year. You get to spend time with family. It's just sometimes it's snowing. You go outside and play a little two-hand touch football, whatever it is. Like, I love Thanksgiving. It's so much fun. The food is so good, and football is on the TV during the best college football week of the entire season.
Well, Kelley, I've always said the biggest problem with Thanksgiving is we don't have great Thanksgiving music. We have great Halloween music, we have great Christmas music, and we've got like an Adam Sandler song in the middle that's supposed to hold us over. And that's the big problem. It really is. Kelley, I appreciate your time as always. If you're traveling, be safe. Happy Thanksgiving to you and the family. And thank you so much for being a part of this show every single week.
Yeah, for sure, Diesel. I appreciate it. Good luck to Clemson and South Carolina this weekend. Happy Thanksgiving, and I'm really excited to see how it all plays out.
Thanks, Kelley. That is Kelley Ford of kfordratings.com.
Later, Kelley.
Make sure you look up his website, kfordratings.com. Find him on Twitter at kfordratings. Look, he puts out the raw numbers, and if you want to interpret that as a slight on your team, then you got bigger problems than most people know how to help you deal with. When we come back, the Carolina Panthers this week hosting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I will be there in the stadium. Am I going to see a repeat performance of Bryce Young, what he had against the Kansas City Chiefs? If he does, well, you got to go into next season feeling good about Bryce. Probably changes very much what the Carolina Panthers may do with their draft picks. That conversation coming up next, right here on The Fan Upstate. Carolina Panthers hosting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this weekend. Can Bryce Young go back-to-back with the performance that we saw last Sunday against the against the Kansas City Chiefs? That is the big question. And if Bryce Young can do it again, the question is what changed? Like what changed in Bryce's mind or in the schemes that he saw that made things click for him? Because what we saw on Sunday of last week was vintage Alabama era Bryce Young. No, he didn't put up a ton of touchdowns. He had one passing touchdown in that game. If he plays a little better in the red zone, maybe we're having a different conversation. I know Carolina kicked a series of field goals to put points on the board in the first half of that game, and that ultimately was the difference in that game. Carolina puts 6 on the board instead of 3 on the board once or twice in that first half, then we may be talking about a very, very different situation down the stretch. But Bryce Young against the Kansas City Chiefs, one of the better defenses in the league this year, 21 of 35 for 263 and 1 touchdown. Now, the 1 touchdown, again, is what concerns me about Bryce Young, because that has basically not changed from the way he's played in games early this season and last season as well. He was good for a touchdown and getting the team in field goal range a number of times. A lot of people are really gassing up Bryce Young from that performance that he had. And I get it. It was against the Chiefs. It makes you feel good if you're a Carolina Panthers fan to see that. But really, Bryce Young was great between the 25s. Get him in the red zone, and he couldn't make anything happen. So that 263 is a great number. I'm not taking anything away from Bryce Young and his 263. Patrick Mahomes threw for 269 yards. But the difference is Patrick Mahomes threw for 3 touchdowns and Bryce Young threw for 1. So we saw improvement from Bryce Young against the Kansas City Chiefs last week. The question is, can he do it again this week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? And that's what I'm going to find out. I'll be on site at Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte on Sunday for the 4:00 kick. Yes, I'll be at Dave & Buster's Woodruff Road in Greenville from 1 until 2. I will jump in the car and I will haul butt to Charlotte. Hopefully we don't hit the traffic that you pretty much always hit on I-85. But good news is I've made that drive. I've pulled in right before we get to right before kickoff at Carolina Panthers games. And it's actually fairly easy to jump right in and get yourself a spot to park and get in. But good news for Carolina, if they get the same performance against Tampa that they had against Kansas City, the Bucs have the 29th best defense in the country. They're allowing a ton of touchdowns. They've allowed 31 touchdowns this season. That's not good when you consider the Eagles have given up just 21 touchdowns this season. So it's going to be on Bryce Young. He's going to have to play another excellent football game and maybe start chipping away at the narrative that Bryce Young is not an NFL caliber quarterback. Mark Schlereth even said it himself on these airwaves a couple of weeks ago. He is not an NFL caliber quarterback. Maybe that can change. Maybe it won't. We'll also see the return of Baker Mayfield in Charlotte. Last time I saw Baker Mayfield, he was playing for the Carolina Panthers. So that's going to be really fun to watch. A reminder for you, coming up in just 20 minutes time, I will have your third and final chance this week to win Trans-Siberian Orchestra tickets. That's coming up at 5:20. You want to win? Be ready. When we come back, let's jump right back into the Clemson and South Carolina rivalry, the Palmetto Bowl, if anybody still calls it that. And I want you, the Gamecock fans and the Tiger fans, to say something nice about the other side of the rivalry. Can you do that? Can you do that? That's an interesting question. We'll get to that next, right here on the Fan Upstate.
the gridiron to the tracks.
Electrifying sports talk from start to finish.
You're going wire to wire
With Diesel and Cole Bryson.
on the Fan Upstate.
One day in an elementary school in Columbia, a teacher asks her class if the South Carolina Gamecocks are their favorite football team. The whole class says yes, except for little Jimmy. The teacher asks, "What's your favorite football team then, Jimmy?" Jimmy says, "The Clemson Tigers." The teacher asks, "Well, why is that?" Jimmy replies, "Well, my dad is a Tiger fan. My mom is a Tiger fan. I guess that makes me a Tiger fan." The teacher, angered by his reply, says, "If your dad was a moron and your mom was an idiot, what would that make you?" Little Jimmy says, "Well, I guess that would make me a South Carolina fan." Boom! Got him. Congratulations and thank you to Yabba Dabbo Do on TigerNet for that excellent zinger. It's rivalry week. It's hate week between Clemson and South Carolina. The Palmetto Bowl. We got to come up with something better than Palmetto Bowl, right? Like, it's not a bowl game. Even though the people used to throw the word bowl around all the time. They would call the Clemson NC State game the Textile Bowl because Raleigh had a lot of textiles and so did the upstate of South Carolina. But I don't like Palmetto Bowl. Got to come up with something better than that. It's Wire to Wire with Diesel and Cole Bryson. Cole is off today. He is out in a field somewhere. Well, probably not now. I don't know. Maybe we're right at golden hour as the deer are about to move. So maybe this is his last shot of the day to get a hold of one. I hope he does because he promised me a venison steak if he got one. Cole, make it happen. I want you, the Tolos, you Clemson and South Carolina faithful, to call in or text in 71307. Start your text with keyword fan and say something nice about the other side of this rivalry that has so much contentiousness. Is it contentiousness or contention between the sides? Contention between the sides? Yeah, I mean, look, I've said for years on this station that the reason why Clemson and South Carolina fans who call each other coots and taters, and for a long time, I wondered if I needed to hit the dump button when you Clemson fans called Gamecock fans coots. I thought that was like a slang word that we couldn't say on the radio. Turns out a coot's a bird. Coot's a bird with a red eye. That makes sense why you would call the Gamecocks coots. I call you Angry Birds when you call in, text in, upset about something it is we've said. But you guys are all the same. You realize that? You're all exactly the same. You all get mad about the same things. A lot of you vote the same way. And a lot of you use the exact same insults hurled back and forth at each other. I love it. I love it. This rivalry is so much fun, and it's so much better this year for the fact that we have a solid head-to-head rivalry where both teams have a good chance of winning this football game. Now, Clemson has certainly got some issues on the offensive line, and how healthy those guys are is going to make all the difference in this game. It'll be the only thing that keeps Clemson in this game, right? Phil Maffa a little bit banged up. A lot of guys on the offensive line banged up. Even Jake Brenningstool banged up. He's expected to be back for this game. South Carolina is going to try to overwhelm Clemson with Dylan Stewart and crew around this around the line of scrimmage, and it's going to make this game very, very interesting. If Clemson can block South Carolina's defensive line and their pass rush, I think they have a good chance. I think Clemson's wide receiving core is good enough to get separation, and then we'll see. We'll just see how accurate Cade Klubnik is through this game. But I think it's going to be absolutely fascinating to watch with just so much on the line. We talked about it earlier in this show. Clemson's got the Dabo conversation on the line. They've got their legacy conversation on the line. South Carolina's trending up right now. And you have a chance probably not to make the college football playoff, but you certainly have a chance to knock Clemson out of the college football playoff picture. And we go to the phone lines right now and bring on an infamous Tolo now at this point, because he said something on these airwaves a couple of days back that really kind of rubbed both the Clemson and South Carolina fans the wrong way, which I don't know if you're aware of this, Creed. You brought two sides of this state together in a way that they almost never come together, and that they all equally call you a 4-letter word that I can't say on the radio. Creed, welcome to the show.
That might hurt my feelings, but it's such a bright time. This is the most perfect time to be a fan of both, because when South Carolina beat what I will be for South Carolina, obviously, I hope they beat them by 23. At the same time, when Syracuse beats Miami, Clemson don't care, because then Clemson beats SMU by 17, which helps Carolina get in, and they're both in the playoffs.
That's an interesting scenario you just laid out there, Creed. Clemson loses this game. It doesn't matter because you believe Syracuse will beat Miami, putting Clemson into the ACC championship game, that you say they will beat SMU and get into the playoff that way.
There you go.
That is
and then when they play in the playoffs, I'll just bet on the over. Okay.
I love it. I love it, Creed. Can you say something, since you're a fan of both, again, which a lot of people think there should be a resolution against in this state? Send it to the state house. Let them debate about it. Can you say something nice about both sides of this rivalry?
Yes, I can say something. No, actually, I really can't. I don't want to be that hated. No.
Oh.
Each of them suck. That way everybody.
Oh, okay? Creed. Now you really are just pissing off both sides. Thank you for the phone call. That is Creed. Tolo, 71307-844-FAN phone, 844-326-3663. Follow Creed's message there. Jump in and say something nice. Or, you know what? I can't control what you say. You could jump in here and say something mean, but I'm not going to turn the mic off on you. Texter says, I'll be nice. The Coots aren't as embarrassing as they used to be. That's a backhanded compliment, Texter. But I appreciate you trying, at least. I appreciate you trying. You didn't. You didn't try. You didn't try at all. The Coots aren't as embarrassing as they used to be. You're not wrong. You're not wrong in the sense that finally we have a matchup worth talking about outside of the state of South Carolina. This thing got really, really insular for a while, to where only people here in this state cared about it, right? Like, people in Ohio didn't care about this game. Now, they're not going to anyway, right? Because they got Ohio State, Michigan this weekend. But people in Kentucky weren't going to care about this game. People in Missouri aren't going to care about this game. People in California aren't going to care about this game. But now they will, because real playoff implications are on the line, and it is absolutely phenomenal for the state to finally have both of these two teams in a position where they can win this football game. How that Clemson offensive line stacks up and holds up, that's going to be the real thing. Now, I've criticized Dabo over the course of this season for getting up by 30, 40 points in the third quarter, going to his second and third team guys, because, well, in this era of college football, you need all the style points you can get, right? You, especially if you're playing in the ACC, playing against weaker competition, you need the style points. You need to look really good against them so that if there is a doubt, you get the benefit of the doubt. I mean, you also need to beat Louisville, but that didn't happen. We're in this room now, right? So can Clemson's offensive line stand up? Hold up. I think it helps that they actually did play so many players over the course of the season, playing second and third string guys, getting those depth guys in there. No, they're not going to be as good, but your second and third string guys, when they go in, they're actually going to have some experience. And that's going to be huge for the Clemson Tigers, because I'm telling you, South Carolina's defensive line and pass rush is coming for Cade. I mean, they're going to try to harry him all game long. I mean, I would look for them to blitz almost every single play. They got to test that line somehow, right? They got to test that line. So they're going to blitz. They're going to try to bring Phil Moffitt down in the backfield. And if they can do that, they make Clemson one-dimensional. Number one, it's going to force Cade Klubnik out of the pocket, and he hasn't looked fantastic out of the pocket. Number two, trying to get around the edge and then pick up yardage. Well, that's tough too because you got a really good secondary in South Carolina that can close really, really quickly. So South Carolina's pass rush does its thing. This game's going to be a long, long game for Clemson. Texter says, I once had a buddy ask me if he could borrow my Gamecock windbreaker to go to the bathroom. So I asked him if he had to take a Clemson. Oh, Texter. See, I asked you to say something nice. You said something crappy. Who do you think you are? Disrespecting this show in that way. Jeff is taking Washington plus 19 on Saturday. Washington are playing Oregon, by the way. I don't think that's going to happen, Jeff, but hey, I appreciate you swinging for the fences there. Pac-Fan Shuff going with Auburn plus 11.5 over Alabama. I like that one a lot more, Pac-Fan Shuff, than I like Jeff's pick. But hey, Jeff's got some ground to make up. Jeff, by the way, Jeff, you have a very common name there, Jeff. I think there might be multiple Jeffs in our challenge. I just want to make sure which Jeff you are, because we got a Hurricane Jeff. I don't know that you're Hurricane Jeff, because Hurricane Jeff always texts in as Hurricane Jeff. I think we've got multiple Jeffs in this challenge. So do me a favor. If this is your first week being in the challenge, let me know. And are you Jeff R? Are you Jeff R? Help me out. And if you need to amend that text, let me know. I just want to make sure that we know that you are the person that we think you are. Because when you got so dang many Tolos playing this game, sometimes it gets difficult. You got to make sure that you're texting in the same way every single time. Oh, that's Clemson Jeff. It's Clemson Jeff. Negate everything that I just said, Clemson Jeff. I'm the idiot who didn't read. Like, people just text in the word Clemson randomly. They just throw it in. Like, hey, Diesel, how's your Clemson going? You know, I can mean anything. People will just say stuff like that. We got messages coming in on the stream on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. Madcraft says, played at the perfect football kickoff time of high noon. Ridiculous. It is ridiculous. It is ridiculous, Madcraft, that this game is a noon game. It should be, at the very least, a 3:30 kick so that you get the sunset by the end of the game. Things get super hyped. If it's a close game, it looks great on television. Whoever at ESPN, whatever four-letter you-know-what up there, made the decision to make this a noon kickoff ought to be fired. Madcraft says, I sent you an X about a Clemson fan story. You sent me an X. I think you mean you tweeted me, because it's Twitter. I'll never call it X. Never going to do it. Look up the Fan Upstate on Twitter at the Fan Upstate. Look for me at Diesel on Radio and Cole Bryson at the Cole Bryson. When we come back, gonna go a little rogue. Gonna go a little off road for you. Something special on the other side. Right here on the Fan Upstate, and Chris Phillips of SEC Unfiltered coming up at 5:40.
Wire to Wire with Cole, Bryson, and Diesel on The Fan.
Upstate.
Here it is, Texters, your chance to win Trans-Siberian Orchestra tickets. If you've never been to a TSO show, it's an absolute ball. Number one, wife, kids, they're going to love, even grandparents, they're going to love the first half of the show. They always do like split shows. First half is always, a nice Christmas story. It's a telling of a Christmas story with music and singing and lights, and it's great, right? It's not for me. The first half of the show is not for me. The first half of the show is for the wife, kids, and grandparents. The second half of the show, though, that's when it gets real. That's when it gets real. I know Ben is an aficionado of heavy metal music, and he loves the second half of the TSO show because most people don't know this. TSO used to be a metal band in the 80s called Savatage. And so they've just taken all of that metal band angst and energy and they sprinkle a little bit of snow on it. And man, I'm telling you, it is the best shredding guitar, fire, smoke, laser light show you have ever seen. And you right now could win 2 tickets to go to Trans-Siberian Orchestra December 13th at Bon Secours Wellness Arena in Greenville. All you need to do is through this segment, so you've got about 10 minutes or so, text the word winter to 71307. Make sure you start your text with the keyword fan. So here's how it would look. You type in 71307 in the number box, and then you type in fan winter to 71307, and you could score those tickets. We're going to take a random texter in the very next commercial break and win 2 tickets to their all-new version of The Lost Christmas Eve, the final chapter of TSO's Christmas trilogy at Bon Secours Wellness Arena, Friday, December 13th. Cutoff again at the end of this segment. Text fan winter for your chance to win. Ben, how excited are you to go see TSO?
I wish I could text. I wish I could text in.
You can't, though, because you work here.
Yeah. So we're just going to have to grab them up the old-fashioned way.
Beat Roy up and take him?
That's it. The old-fashioned way.
Yeah, that is the old-fashioned. Or you just
way.
sneak in the back door somewhere.
That's it.
Yeah, TSO really is a blast. So Tolos, get to it if you want to win those tickets. Man, look, wow. You guys have already jumped all over this. See, texters, you got one texter got the word from yesterday. That's not the right word. The word today is winter. Markello Ducks is in this thing. You don't have to sign your text, but if you want to, that's cool too. We'll take a winner at the end of this thing. So I asked you in the last segment to say something nice about the other side of this rivalry. Not everybody fell into line. Not everybody said something nice. Let's be real. Nobody said anything nice. Texter says, as an outsider looking in, I think Clemson is losing by 14 plus. Outsider, like how outside are you? Are you a fan of a North Carolina team? We have a lot of transplants from Ohio. Are you looking at it through that lens? Interesting. Okay, Cocky for a reason does say something nice here. He says Clemson has a nice tailgate atmosphere. That's true. It is nice. And he says, and you get to leave the stadium and return, which is true. You can return if your truck is nearby, go get a beer, come back into the stadium. Not many stadiums do that. He says, and they can storm the field and not pay $500,000. I guess that's nice. I think it's more of a statement of fact, but you're right, Cocky, for a reason. I don't know if they do field rushing fines in the ACC the way that they do in the SEC. But we're going to see that more and more and more. Everybody always complains about rushing the field. Oh, you can't rush the field. Act like you've been there before. You can't stop it. Not now. Like, you really think a sophomore chemistry major hopped up on Adderall just trying to get through the semester? You really think that kid cares about a $500,000 fine that South Carolina's having to pay to Texas A&M? No, he doesn't care about that. He just wants to rush the field. He's feeling good. He wants to go. You're not going to be able to stop rushing the field unless you find a way to make it uncool. And you will never make rushing the field uncool. You just can't, because it's cool. Brandon in Spartanburg says he's taking Syracuse plus 11 over Miami. So what I wanted to talk to you about in this segment, and we're going to have Chris Phillips of SEC Unfiltered on the show in the very next segment. He's actually going to be joining us on the web stream as well. So jump in there, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, at The Fan Upstate. You can ask your questions of Chris Phillips. I love being able to relay your questions to our guests. But I'm going to tell you about a show that you need to be watching. It's called The Match. It's organized and put together by TNT. They have a show called The Match. And what it does is it pits, this season at least, it's now about 5 days old. If you didn't watch this in prime time, you can go back and stream it on Max, probably on the TNT app as well. They pit mega stars together from different walks of life into a golf match. You ever wonder, like, the celebrities who play golf, if they're actually any good? Well, guess what? You get to see Michael Phelps and Mark Wahlberg go head-to-head with Nate Bargatze and Blake Griffin, who, by the way, Blake Griffin sucks at golf. Like, he's better than me. I'm not going to lie. But, like, if he's in a golf challenge, you expect him to be better at golf than he is. The dude is shanking them left and right off the tee. He can't hit his driver. But they also bring in celebrities like Ken Griffey Jr., Bill Murray, Wayne Gretzky out there playing golf head-to-head. The episode I watched, I haven't watched the whole thing yet, but the episode I watched was Phelps and Wahlberg versus Bargatze and Griffin. And then they had the NBA on TNT crew, who we all know and love, who we all, I think, pretty commonly agree is by far the best crew who talks sports, who breaks down sports pre and post game. I mean, they're absolutely fantastic. They got those guys. They got Kenny and they got Chuck in the golfers' ears, trash talking them while they're playing. That's amazing, right? Like, golf is such a sport of concentration, and anything can knock you off your game and could like really screw you up for a couple of holes. And then you got Charles Barkley telling you suck in your ear. And then you got Blake Griffin going back at him and saying, Chuck, you never won anything either. Ooh. He's talking about how Chuck played his entire career, known as one of the best to ever play the game, never won a championship. These guys needling each other. They all know each other, but they're needling each other. They're talking to each other the way you and I talk to each other, the way bros talk to each other. It's absolutely worth tuning in to watch. The weirdest thing I learned watching the episode that I did is that Mark Wahlberg putts right-handed, but swings every other club left-handed. I can't even fathom. Can't even fathom how that happens. What's funny is growing up as a kid, I was a switch hitter playing baseball. Like when I was playing little league baseball. And then after that, I stopped hitting lefty, and I can't even remotely come close to doing it anymore. It would be like watching somebody pick up a bat for the very, very first time. Definitely tune in and watch the match. Superstars bring in a ton of big time celebrities. It's one of the most entertaining shows you'll watch in a long time. Bubba Watson is there. He's actually the on-course reporter. He's trash talking him right back. He's two-time Masters champion talking trash to these NBA megastars and movie stars trying to get in their head while they're playing golf. And it's just a round of golf that's definitely entertaining to watch. And I think you should check it out. So let's run off to break. Texters, we're going to pick a winner here in just about 30 seconds as soon as we finish this segment. Pick a winner for those TSO tickets, and then we'll be heading off to talk to Chris Phillips of SEC Unfiltered. That'll be coming up next right here on 97.7 FM, 97.1 FM in Spartanburg. I take it, texters, that our 97.7 signal is still a little scratchy and weak. So Spartanburg, it's just me and you and everybody rocking on the stream as well and on the free Odyssey app. We'll talk to Chris Phillips next right here on the Fan Upstate.
You're listening to the underground of sports talk radio, where we're not afraid.
with Diesel and Cole Bryson on the Fan Upstate.
Congratulations to Mark Ello Ducks taking home the 2 tickets to go see Trans-Siberian Orchestra. Well, I guess he's not really taking them home. They're just heading right to his phone, and he's going to head out and see the show coming up in December. So congratulations to him. Keep listening. I do believe we're going to have more chances to win those tickets when we come back on Monday from break. So if you want to go see the show, I think you're going to have a good chance to win them right here on 97.7, the Fan Upstate in Greenville. Rob Brown, I think, had the hookup as well. So be listening to him. Hey, we're waiting for Chris Phillips of SEC Unfiltered. And just like that, just on time, he jumps right into the stream. Now, Chris, we always say that we don't have enough time to chop it up with you, right? Because we could sit and talk football for an hour if you could stand the side of us long enough to do that. Thanks for taking the time to jump on with us today in what is by far the best week of sports if you're a college football fan of the entire year. I don't care about the Super Bowl. I don't care about March Madness. This is it, my friend.
Diesel, I agree, man. What's going on? I love the shirt, by the way, for the viewers that can't see. Rocking the App State. Hey, in the studio right here, baby.
I love it.
We got
it.
it.
He's even got the new one.
I got the new one. Roll Nears, baby. Roll Nears. Got Georgia Southern this weekend in a big one. Carolina's got Clemson. And we're headed to College Station for A&M Texas, man. So it's going to be a great weekend. And, by the way, you didn't even mention this. For college sports fans, we've also got Feast Week going on. College basketball. There's been some really good games that we've been covering over at SEC Unfiltered. Auburn, North Carolina took place last night. Bama played Houston in a game that felt like March Madness. So, yeah, man, this is a great time of year and a great week. And certainly, again, rivalry weekend, man. I think it's one of, if not the best weekends of the year in college football.
Yeah, I had a conversation with our mutual friend Jake Crain earlier in the day today. Replayed it in the first hour of the show, and he said, "Look, we're all fans of somebody, and pretending that you're not ought to be a crime." So he said, wear it with pride. So I gotta rock it out here on Hate Week, the deeper than Hate Week between App State and Georgia Southern. And look, I want to apologize to you because you drove up to Boone on the wrong week to go see a game. You drove up for, I believe it was the South Alabama game?
Alabama, and they got boat raced. Yeah.
And App State didn't even show up. They didn't show up. They got absolutely boat raced. You should have gone up this past weekend. There was snow everywhere. People were throwing snowballs at the players, which feels to me like a tiny, tiny little bit of an SEC type feel, right? If I know there's not a lot of stadiums that get snow in the SEC, but that would 100% happen, right? Throwing snowballs at the other team, except in the SEC, you throw bottles and cans.
Yeah, it absolutely would have. It's funny enough, on a side note, Diesel, I'll be up in that area in about a week and a half, 2 weeks. We're going to break in the new skis, first ski trip up by Boone. So I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, I did, I had a great time when I went, but the game I picked, South Alabama was, I think the halftime score was 28-7, I think. And I remember they scored via Hail Mary right before the half, and that's why I stayed. And it was just a complete bloodbath. So we'll have to get back up there, a little redemption trip.
Yeah. So Chris, I mean, it's hard to pick what's the biggest rivalry. I'm not going to say biggest rivalry in the SEC because with the SEC, you got a lot of cross-conference rivalries between Georgia and Georgia Tech, Clemson, and South Carolina. Obviously, within the SEC, you got the Egg Bowl, you got Florida State. Well, that's not within the SEC, but you got Texas now, Texas A&M. It's really hard to pick the biggest one. So let's start with Alabama, Auburn. Okay, Auburn did something miraculous last week. They came and actually showed a pulse, and they got it done against Texas A&M. Now, that game could have kept going for more and more and more overtimes. I would have sat there glued to it the whole time. But I've seen people, pundits, saying that everything is on the line for Alabama in this game. I mean, this is the history dead? Is the dynasty dead? Which some would say that it already is. What's on the line for you in your mind in this game?
Yeah, I think more pressure is on Alabama, to your point, than Auburn, just from the standpoint of, what Kalen DeBoer took over, the program he inherited, taking over for a legend, et cetera. Auburn on their side, they've been an okay team or a pretty solid team masquerading as a bad team all year. And just with self-inflicted wounds, self-inflicted errors. You look at their statistics and it doesn't match their record. And it just finally came together last week to where they were able to make those winning plays and those winning calls, and it mattered most against A&M. But again, to your point for the Bama side, and this is just a huge game. Kalen DeBoer's first Iron Bowl. Obviously you want to set the tone in this rivalry, and don't upset the established order. This game's huge for recruiting as well. There will be a lot of recruits on hand, and the one thing you can say about Hugh Freeze is the momentum that he has created in recruiting already. Certainly you got to win in the Iron Bowl. It could flip it even further. So, 9-3 is an unacceptable finish, but Diesel 8-4 and losing to your arch rival Auburn would be the absolute worst case nightmare scenario. And oh, by the way, Diesel, with a win, let's face it, there's still a decent chance that Alabama can back their way into the 12-team college football playoff. So their postseason hopes are on the line. Diesel, I'm picking Auburn in this football game. Yes, I'm picking Auburn, and not to spoil my upset pick, but that's actually it. I'm going with the Auburn Tigers. I just see one side going one way, one side going the other. I think Hugh Freeze and DJ Durkin will get in their bag, nothing to lose, and I think all the pressure's on the Crimson Tide. I'm not to a point where I trust Kalen DeBoer and Kane Womack and that staff. So, and even Jalen Milroe, who's just been really up and down, inconsistent, was obviously atrocious a week ago against Oklahoma. So I think Auburn's starting to play their best ball at the right time, and I'm going to go with the upset. A little bit of a reach because it's been 14 years since they won in that building, but I'm going to go with the upset. It just fits college football this season. I like Auburn to get the win.
How much goodwill does beating Alabama buy for Hugh Freeze? It's been a little bit of a rocky start, a little bit slower than people expected to. He came in with all that history and all that hype, and does beating Alabama essentially wipe all of that away and even start him going into next season on a better foot?
I think it certainly lessens the heat of his seat to a degree. I think he's still going to be under pressure, obviously, because even with the finish, you'd go 6-6, and 6-6 is not good enough at Auburn. It wasn't the expectation this year, so there will be pressure. But no doubt, Diesel. It's like all the other great rivalries. You win that last game, and it forgives a lot of your previous sins, if that makes sense. So certainly, if Hugh Freeze was able to get that one. I believe the momentum they would have going into the offseason, going into recruiting, et cetera. There's a much different feel and a much different, vibe about year 2 of his tenure than if you lose that football game, go 5-7, and you can't help but just look back at what if, and you lose to Kalen DeBoer, where you feel like, I think what would be so difficult for Auburn fans too, you feel like Bama's really gettable this year. This is your best chance to win in Tuscaloosa probably in a decade, since I think the 2014 game. So huge opportunity for the Tigers. And then again, on the other side, it's just as pivotal for Bama because of, again, these type of rivalries, we know it really well in the Palmetto State with South Carolina Clemson. Man, it sticks with you 24/7, 365. So win or lose this one, especially when neither one of these teams most likely is going to win a national title, certainly not Auburn, probably not Bama. This one's going to kind of define, Diesel, how your season went.
Chris, I look at this Texas A&M game, and I feel obviously that Texas is safe, win or lose in this game. They're not falling outside of the college football playoff. So you could say, in theory, not that it does in practice, but in theory, it takes a little bit of that pressure off of Texas in this game. But hey, this is the first time these two teams are locking up in quite a long time in the same conference. I think A&M is going to come out pissed off basically over what happened at the end of that Auburn game. And obviously with Quinn Ewers' status up in the air, I know Texas fans feel pretty decent about Arch Manning in backup there, but man, that's definitely going to put a big old question mark on this game. How you seeing this one going?
Yeah, and first thing I'll say is this, Diesel. I'm feel very fortunate, grateful to be attending this one. Over the summer, admittedly, this felt like a game that it felt like almost an unattendable football game with just how big it is and the ticket prices and everything else. And so to say that I'll be going, we're flying out to Houston on Friday. We'll go down to College Station, be there for the weekend to be going to this football game, experiencing Kyle Field for the first time. Man, I can't wait for it. I can't wait for it. Now, from the game standpoint, to your point, we've seen this scenario all year, have we not? From where, the home team in their home venue at night that has everything to lose seems to rise to the occasion. I will say this, though, to your point about it takes some pressure off Texas. I equate it to, because I know it best, like a South Carolina Clemson. I think Iron Bowl is the same way. talking to Texas and Texas A&M people, Diesel, this is a game, it doesn't need trophies. It doesn't need postseason implications. It doesn't need rings or anything else outside of we hate you and you hate us. And those bragging rights matter more than anything. Like that, this game means everything. It's just like how the game would mean everything if they were both 0-11. It means everything. So, yes, Texas, they're probably still going to get in the playoff, sure. But I don't think anybody's going to want to hear that this weekend. I'm expecting a classic. Again, we haven't gotten this game, Diesel, in 13 years. It feels destined that this game is just meant to be a classic down to the wire. I do agree with you, Quinn Ewers' status. Is he sort of limited? We'll kind of see. And asking Arch Manning to come in an environment like this, I know Arch is really, really good. He's going to be a great player, but might be asking too much. It all comes down to the point of attack, and I think the line of scrimmage for Texas A&M. I think they're defensively going to bounce back. I think Mike Elko is going to have a great plan defensively. I think they can make Quinn Ewers uncomfortable and get the football off him a couple times. And I think offensively, as long as they can find balance in the running game, use Marcel Reed in the quarterback run, improvising, getting outside of the pocket, I think Texas A&M has got a great shot, and I think they do win this football game. I feel like I'm picking a lot of upsets this weekend, but rivalry weekend just calls it, man. It happens. And I think with that home crowd, that home atmosphere, I think another really underrated facet of this game, Diesel, when it comes to Texas's offensive line, Quinn Ewers, crowd noise and the 12th man is going to impact them on the offense trying to operate. So I think A&M uses all that. I think it's a magical night in College Station, and I think it's right on brand, Diesel, with what the SEC Unfiltered Tour has seen this season. It'll be another classic, another great night, and we're probably going to end up rushing another field.
Chris, you said it there. You've seen a tremendous series of games this season as you've traveled around. Have all these stadiums that you've been to this year been first time at these stadiums? And I know it's kind of hard to pick one. It's like picking between your children. Which one has been your favorite one so far? But where have you been? What campus would you say is just truly special? That's just next level above all the others.
Yeah, and it's been about Diesel 90% of them that have been my first time. I mean, what people may not realize is that, you know, when I was doing the Spurs Up show, obviously I was going to Williams-Brice Stadium constantly, and then we would do watch parties for road games. So I wouldn't travel, you know. So, I mean, before this season, I had only been to Williams-Brice Stadium. I'd been to Clemson. I'd been to Sanford Stadium. I'd been to the Panthers, which doesn't really count. And I'd been to LSU during COVID, though. So that doesn't really count either. So that was it. So virtually all these places I've been have been first times for me. The one that stands out that's been the most special to this point, again, I have really high expectations, Diesel, for Kyle Field. I will be surprised if I leave there, and I'm not saying this is the loudest venue, the craziest environment I saw during the entire tour. I'd probably have to say right now it's LSU, though. We're going to do SEC Unfiltered Tour superlatives, by the way, postseason, because for everything, all these places are great in their own way. Some places have the best city, the best college town, the best food, you name it. We can break this thing down, but the best environment that I've been a part of and the most special and unique place, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, by far. It's different. It's a one of one. You know, the thing that it gives the advantage to, Diesel, the culture. It's such a strong culture down there. And then, of course, I caught a great game, right? Night game. It was LSU Ole Miss. Place was packed out. They win the game in overtime. Again, we rushed the field. But that LSU is part of my heart will always be in Baton Rouge, man. It is a really, really special, unique place.
Chris Phillips, SEC Unfiltered, joins us here each and every week right here in this time slot. And we're giving a little extra time, man, because this is rivalry week and so many big games going on in the SEC this weekend. Let's move to the one right here. You just talked about South Carolina. They're playing at Clemson, noon kickoff. I don't know who that favors. Nobody's going to be – maybe it's going to favor South Carolina a little bit because the Clemson fans can't get quite as drunk and rowdy before the game starts. But, man, I feel like South Carolina is just going to maul Clemson's depleted offensive line, and that's going to make things really difficult on Cade Klubnik. Maybe throwing a pick six, see shades of the Oklahoma game. Is that how you see it going? Or do you think Clemson's skill positions can kind of hold that at bay?
Yeah, and Diesel, to your point, since we got extra time, I'll go back to this. Loudest noon game I've ever heard was earlier this season, South Carolina LSU. That was that was an insane asylum, and you got to give Gamecock fans a lot of credit.
I was in an 8 a.m. LSU kickoff once. And that's because there was a hurricane coming. App State was playing at LSU. It was supposed to be a night game. And as we're driving down I-85, every rest stop we hit, we ran into a fan that said, oh, no, now it's a 4 o'clock game. Now it's a 2 o'clock game. Now it's a noon game. Now it's an 8 a.m. game. So, man, I'm telling you, we weren't sober for that game. I can promise you that. The LSU faithful made sure that we weren't sober for that one.
Yeah, that South Carolina LSU game, that was the craziest day game I've ever experienced. But this game specifically, the Palmetto Bowl, man, the Battle of the Palmetto State, whatever you want to call it, and again, one of the best rivalries in the sport. If not, I think you could argue it's the best, right up there with some of the best of them. To your point, I think it starts the line of scrimmage for South Carolina. Nobody wants to play the Gamecocks right now. You mentioned the noon kickoff. I think it helps South Carolina. I saw a lot of people complaining, let's get the night game. I mean, if you're on the road at your rival's place, you probably would rather not play them at night. But, yeah, man, I really like South Carolina in this game. I'm picking South Carolina. I mean, this is another one where I'm going – technically we're going with the underdog. It doesn't feel like South Carolina should be the underdog, if I'm being totally honest. I mean, listen, Clemson's had a fine year, but I look at their schedule and look at who they played. I'm like, who have they beaten? Every time they've played a good team, they've gotten mollywopped, it feels like. Every single time. And you look at South Carolina, again, the way they're playing. I think their front seven's going to feast. I think you're going to hear Kyle Kennard and Dylan Stewart's name a lot. Obviously, what Demetrius Knight, Debo Williams have done as well. I mean, that defense has feasted all year. And I think, again, like to your point, they're going to take advantage of a depleted Clemson offensive line, force Cade Klubnik into some mistakes. Listen, if they can hold up, huge if, could things get dicey in the back end with some of Clemson wide receivers. But still, I trust the Gamecock secondary as well. And I think they'll get enough pressure on Cade Klubnik, slow down Phil Maffa enough. And on the other side, again, I just mentioned Marcel Reed talking about the A&M Texas game. I think Lenoris Sellers' escapability, the way he can improvise, and also, too, the confidence this kid is playing with right now. Diesel, I don't think there's a more improved player from week 1 to week 14 in the SEC, Lenoris Sellers. I mean, he's coming to his own. He's confident. And again, we knew he had a lot of ability. And when you couple it with that confidence as well, you get what you see. And also, Rocket Sanders continues to run like a madman. I think because of Lenoris Sellers' playmaking ability, getting out of the pocket, I think it's helped the wide receiver group. Nick Harbor's coming to his own. Joshua Simon's a freak at the tight end position. But I think defense is the story, Diesel. I do. And I think South Carolina's defense is the one that dominates Clemson. I'm going 24-14 final score. I think they're really going to hold Clemson in check and frustrate them. And I think Clemson's defense at times, too, is going to win some battles because that's a really good group. But I think it'll be South Carolina with that final punch late, probably a Rocket Sanders touchdown or something that puts it away for good. But I think South Carolina's defense will be the story of this football game, kind of like they've been all season.
Chris, hypothetically speaking here, if Cade Klubnik and Lenoris Sellers were both available in the transfer portal, all things being equal, if their NIL requests were roughly the same, et cetera, who would you rather have? Who would you rather take out of the portal?
And, I'll say this. I think Cade Klubnik's had a really good year. I think he's been much, because his stock after last year was extremely low, right? So, I mean, I don't think he's nearly as bad a player as some maybe even still want to make him out to be, but I'd go Lenoris Sellers. I just think when you look at, I mean, he's the kind of kid, he's the kind of quarterback, when you're playing EA College Football 25 and you're building a guy custom, you create Lenoris Sellers, essentially. Like, he is just the prototypical, exactly what you want, size, speed, agility, big arm, escapability. From everything I hear leadership qualities as well. So, top to bottom, man, I'd go Lenoris Sellers. And I think the thing that's been so impressive, guys, Lenoris Sellers has made that team better around him. And that's a really special trait and a special quality. And it's why you see South Carolina sitting at 8-3 right now and, potentially fighting for a spot in the college football playoff.
Yeah, I think Lenoris Sellers has got a lot more upside, a lot more versatility and weapons. And yeah, if you got a kid as big as Lenoris Sellers coming at you in the secondary, it's going to make you think twice about trying to tackle him.
Diesel, he's still so young. I don't think he's even really tapped in. And I think, too, as they continue to add weapons, I think that'll certainly be their priority number one over the offseason is go get him some weapons, go get him some skill position guys. You get him a couple of elite wide receivers. I mean, it's going to be really, really tough for any defense to defend that.
Chris, we got about 30 seconds left. Who are you taking as your Week 14 upset pick?
Yeah, I'm going to go Auburn, plus 11.5. I think they beat Alabama straight up. Listen, streaks are meant to be broken. It's been 14 years since they've won in Tuscaloosa. The comeback, Cam Newton and the boys, coming all the way back, and that one was the last time they won. I think Hugh Freeze will have a great plan. I think Auburn is really underrated because the self-inflicted wounds I get. But, again, streaks are meant to end. Alabama's reeling. Give me Auburn to win straight up.
Chris, I would not want to be Kalen DeBoer on Sunday morning.
I wouldn't either.
Driving to my house in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, if they lose that football game. Appreciate your insight. As always, invite everybody to go follow you on all your social medias at SEC Unfiltered. Appreciate the time.
Hey, Diesel, appreciate you guys. And roll Nears, by the way, and a happy Thanksgiving to you guys.
Appreciate you, Chris. That is Chris Phillips, SEC Unfiltered. Check him out. When we come back, we go back deep into that conversation about Clemson and South Carolina. What's on the line in this, probably the biggest Palmetto Bowl in rivalry history? That's next on the Fan Upstate.
And now we got some extracurricular activity out there.
This was bound to happen.
And now Lou Holtz scrambles out on the field. And now both benches start to empty.
Right now, you got to get police patrolling this.
November 20th, 2004, 20 years and 1 week ago today, the brawl between South Carolina and Clemson right there at Memorial Stadium in Death Valley. Scary scene. I mean, really, that would have been one of those stories that followed both of these teams for the remainder of the season. You had players fist fighting on the field. You had players taking helmets off, going after each other. You know, cats and dogs were living together. It was pure pandemonium on the field at Death Valley that day. But man, what else could be said about this rivalry that we haven't talked about over the past 10 days? Both of these teams played effectively nobodies last week. Again, no offense to the Citadel, no offense to Wofford, but neither one of those teams are at the level of competition that we're going to give Clemson or South Carolina any bit of a game. Neither one of them were. So we have basically been talking about this game for the last 2 weeks because, well, neither one of them had a test last week. Interestingly enough, both of those teams, both Clemson and South Carolina, handled their respective week number 13 opponents with the same relative level of ass whooping, which would be a can's worth. A whole can of ass whooping was laid on both of those teams. So we spent a lot of time parsing words, splitting hairs, looking at this way, that way, lifting up rocks to try to figure out what's going on with both of these teams. And it really does come down to who wants it more, right? It really does come down to that. Both of these teams and fan bases know that they can win this football game. And that's about the first time in the last decade or more that both of these fan bases could say this at the same time. So I love the fact that this Palmetto Bowl 2024 edition is ramped up to about as high as it possibly can. And yeah, there are some new elements this year that have never happened before, because in years past, sure, South Carolina could have beaten Clemson and knocked them out of playoff contention, but that didn't happen very often. But this year, the loser, either way, fully and completely takes themselves out of playoff contention, and the winner has a shot, has a real shot. And look, for the fact that Clemson has had a down season this year, dropping 2 games, Georgia the way they got absolutely smoked, and Louisville not showing up, and South Carolina blowing a 17-point lead against LSU. I know I'm going to have somebody text in, but the penalties, referees, whatever. You blew a 17-point lead. I don't care about the referees. I don't care about leave no doubt, right? That's what they always say. Leave no doubt. Don't let the referees have a position where they can take something away from you. You didn't play good enough to win the football game. You just didn't. And then when you compare that to the butt whooping they took to Ole Miss, not showing up in that game, coming off a bye, we're in a position where both of these teams still are possibly just a little bit too far out on the outside. South Carolina a little bit more than Clemson. But, hey, with the fact that a Big 12 champion is going to jump the winner of this game, if you're talking about playoff implications, both of these teams comfortably need to reach 10 if they want to be in the college football playoff in an at-large capacity. And, I mean, I can't tell you how exciting it is. And people thought the college football playoff expanding to 12 was going to ruin the season. I mean, on this very station, the former host in this time slot, Mark Ryan, was adamant that this was going to render regular season games less meaningful than they were before. And it has done the exact opposite of that. It is ramped up every single bit of that. And I love it. You know how we talk sometimes about the founding fathers of the United States? And look, I'm not giving the CFP architects that much credit. But when we talk about the way they designed the Constitution with the kind of the switchbacks and this has precedent over that and that has precedent over that, we talk about how perfect a document that is because it safeguards against a lot of things that could go wrong. Well, I think the College Football Playoff Committee architects, not the playoff committee, but the playoff architects, I think they did a fantastic job of creating something that's fairly close to perfect when it comes to a college football playoff structure. And look, I was pro expansion from 4. I really wanted it to go to 8, but I was fine with it going to 12. I loved the structure, the way that we had it, the way that we have it, with the top 4 highest ranked conference champions getting an automatic bye. I love that for the first time we've even had this scenario, a G5 team that I've been beating the drum for the last decade has a very good chance of getting one of those. I love the chaos, right? This wasn't supposed to be chaotic. It was supposed to be very simple. An SEC team was going to get number 1. A Big Ten team was going to get number 2. And then the Big 12 and the ACC could fight it out for 3 and 4. And the G5 was going to be 5th, but they were going to be ranked in the 12th spot, seated in the 12th spot. That's the way that this thing was supposed to go. And in future years, that might be the way that it goes. It may go exactly to script, but not this year. Not this year. We've had chaos. We've had late season games pushing teams in and out of the playoff picture with a week to go. And it can't get any better than that, right? So I think whoever decided to go 4 teams with automatic buys, and then we'll figure it out after that. We'll figure out the 7 at-larges after that. And knowing that they were going to take away one of those spots for the 5th highest ranked conference champion, bringing it down to 6 at-larges, you got 15 teams fighting for 6 spots. And it's absolutely beautiful. I don't know that it could be any better than the way that it is. I think going to 16 at this point, probably going to be a mistake. Jonathan Brooks says, what did Yoda say when he saw himself in 4K video? HD, am I? Interesting. Madcraft says, looking at you, Ben. I'm kidding. He's calling you out. Madcraft's calling you out. But no, like this couldn't be any better. And look, I know that we had that conversation earlier with Jake Crain in the 3:00 hour. And if you missed it, going to replay it coming up here in the very next segment. I know that the powers that be are going to see the opportunity to make more money, and they're going to ruin the great thing that they've created to make more money off of it. And I think it's going to be, well, it's probably going to be just as good. Let's be real. But I think some element of it's going to go away because they will tweak the rules. They will change the rules so that things are more guaranteed for the big conferences and less guaranteed for the smaller conferences, which I think would be a big time mistake. Most years it's going to work itself out the way that it's supposed to work itself out. Most years you're not going to have a Heisman hopeful on Boise State's team. Most years you're not going to have that. So I don't think you should legislate out one spot that you don't want to give up in 1 year and change the rules to tweak something else. I'm not into doing that. Let's go to the phone lines. Go to Tom in Somerville, who wants to break in on the Clemson and South Carolina game. Tom, are you coming around a little bit to what Creed had to say earlier, where you kind of like both teams, or are you still very much and exclusively a Gamecock?
No, I can't agree with that, Diesel. But I like what you're saying here about the playoff as well. One thing I do want to say about, the game that matters to so many people in this state is, you see these other rivalries like you and Chris Phillips were talking about, and, Auburn, Alabama will always be big, and I try not to be biased here, but there really is nothing like South Carolina Clemson when both teams are good. Like it's hard to describe because like most Carolina Clemson fans, they respect each other, but there's still that hatred, and it's just such an awesome game. Mm-hmm. And even the years where both teams are down, like the hatred for one another is unmatched in my opinion. It really is.
And Saturday is going to be a really, really good football game, all jokes aside. I really do think this is going to be a great football game, and I hope everybody's able to enjoy it, and have a good time and stay safe. Diesel, other thing, I'm glad I got on before the night was over. I just wanted to say thank you for always making my weeks enjoyable. I hope you have a great Thanksgiving, and, good luck to your Tigers. But also, you were talking about the group of 5 schools. If you're a school like App State, let's be honest, the years that you can win your conference and possibly go 11-1 or maybe 12-0, why would you even – I know the money aspect is there, but at the same time, why would you want to schedule games like against Clemson now? Because if you can go 12-0, you're going to be in that discussion every single year.
Well, you bring up a good point there, because last year we were having that very same conversation about Liberty, and Liberty had the dead last strength of schedule in the country. Yet they ran the table and they got into a New Year's Six game. Now, this year, possibly, potentially, that would have put them into the college football playoff picture. I think fans want that compelling game. They want to know mid-season. They want to know early just how good they are. And G5 fans know that beating up on the teams that are in your conference, that's fun. That's great and all. I love that. But also, you want to be tested. You want to have the opportunity to show it against the best of the best. And hey, look at Boise State. If they hadn't scheduled Oregon this year in week number 1 and come within, what was it, a 3-point game or a 1-point game, whatever that was?
Yeah, they played Oregon great.
If that hadn't played out the way that it did, they would probably be in the same relative position that Tulane is in number, I think, 17th place. So sort of kind of sitting just too far outside. You'd get the respect of being in the top 25. The committee would look at you and say you're a good football team, but without facing that big time competition, the conversation would always go to, well, who have you played? You haven't played anybody, so we don't feel comfortable putting you in.
That's fair. It's just one of those things. Like, if you're a group of 5 school where, if you can win 11 or 12 games, you're going to be in the top 25, or at least you should be. So if you're in the top 25, there's going to be years where a Boise State is probably going to be 15, but you're also a loss of way. Like right now, Tulane is a Boise State loss away from being that automatic bid as long as they win the American. So, it's an interesting discussion, and I'm glad I got your opinion on it, but either way, Diesel, like I said, thank you for, I enjoy listening to you guys every day, and I hope you have a great Thanksgiving, and good luck this weekend.
Tom, before you run, one of the great things about this rivalry is a lot of families have both Clemson and South Carolina fans in their families. Do you are you going to be sitting down breaking bread with any Tiger fans on Saturday? Tomorrow at your Thanksgiving?
Yes, sir, I am. So, quick funny story here about that. So, my mother's family was much bigger than my father's family, and there was about 60 people that we calculated one time, and it was right down the middle. 30 of them graduated from Clemson. The other 30 graduated from the University of South Carolina. So that's what makes this rivalry so great. Is no matter how you shape it up, you're going to run into both sides, especially around the holiday season. So it makes winning that game that much more important.
Well, Tom, I challenge you to keep it cordial tomorrow. I hope you have a fantastic Thanksgiving. And, of course, we appreciate all of the contributions that you make to this show, because I hope you know that you are a fan favorite. Every single time you call and text in, the text line lights up. Some of them love you, some of them hate you, but that's great because it makes for fantastic radio. We thank you.
Yes, sir, Diesel. You have a good one.
Thanks, Tom. Man, that is Tom from Somerville. We appreciate him joining in with us as much as he possibly can. So, look, we had a great conversation there. The G5 potentially, being in playoff implications. That's always fun for me. I don't want a G5 playoff. I don't want this thing breaking away. I love that intrigue. And hey, for me, y'all might think I'm absolutely crazy here, but if my team makes it into the 12-team playoff, that's pretty damn good for me, right? I don't weigh winning games in the playoff or making it to the Final Four or making it to the finals. I don't gauge the success of my season and judge the quality of my program by how deep of a run they make in the playoff. For me, as a G5 team, knowing how damn hard it is to even be considered in the top 12, that's pretty good. And you get a tremendous amount of support and a tremendous amount of run on television and advertising that you can't pay for. And that's why it's worth it to me for the G5s to still have a place in the 12-team college football playoff. I don't ever want that to change. Unfortunately, I think maybe one of these days it probably will. When we come back, a conversation that we had earlier in the show with Jake Crain of Crain and Company. We kind of go round table on a lot of these big-time matchups, and we go off-road a little bit with him as well. That's coming up next on the Fan Upstate.